Recording in progress.
Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll start with the flag salute. Welcome, everybody. There are agendas in the corner if you are following along. Okay, so tonight we're going to go ahead and start with a roll call.
Commissioner Scavdall.
Here.
Commissioner Levy.
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Curriasi.
Here.
Commissioner McFarland.
Here.
Commissioner Fulton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Director Ford, are there any agenda modifications?
There are no modifications to the agenda. There are a couple of supplementals that are attached and on the dais tonight. They're all for the Humboldt area plan.
Thank you. Okay, this brings us to item D, public comment on non-agenda items. At this time, persons may appear before this commission on any matter pertinent to the commission's jurisdiction, and that is not on the agenda. So if you would like to comment on an item that is not on the agenda tonight, if you are in the room, please approach the podium and form a line. And if you are online, please raise your hand now so that I can see you and call on you once we do the folks in the room. There's a little bit of a lag between the video online sometimes and what's happening in real time in the chamber. So hey, raise your hand now, and that way we know that you're ready to go when we finish doing public comment in person. So with that, and all public commenters will have 3 minutes.
Good evening. By now you know who I am and why I'm here. The Mercer-Fraser Bridgeville Quarry continues to operate in non-compliance. I submitted a detailed letter and supporting documentation via email. I hope you've had time to review it. But tonight I have a few more things for you to ponder. How can a conditional use permit allow someone to operate on another person's property without that property owner's permission? Does this mean one could apply for a demolition permit on a home owned by another person without the owner's permission? Pages 1 and 2 of the issued Mercer-Fraser CUP do not identify any parcels owned by Chalk Mountain Ranch. Page 11 site map shows limiting operations to Goat Rock Ranch parcels only. But the county is allowing Mercer-Fraser to operate on Chalk Mountain outside the permitted project area. Page 32 of the CUP discusses zoning. The county approved zoning as part of the review process, but not for Chalk Mountain's APNs. They were not included in any kind in the review, part of zoning, or CEQA. Page 39 of the CUP identifies the CEQA exemption applied to 2 parcels, both owned by Goat Rock Ranch. Page 43 of the mitigation measures, land use and planning, item C, conflict with applicable habitat conservation plan and community conservation plan, marked no impact. If Chalk Mountain's APNs had been included in the application, the recorded State of California CAL FIRE Forest Legacy Conservation Deed of Easement could have been reviewed and addressed. Instead, the county now has a CUP that appears to be allowing activities prohibited by a conservation easement. So much for page 29, MRP 11, which states the permit conditions and operations must minimize conflicts with adjacent landowners and land uses. Mercer-Fraser's own attorneys have repeatedly stated that the roads are part of Mercer-Fraser's operations. The plan of operations, CUP, and several agency responses describe the Lower Quarry Road in detail, including extensive work to be done. Again, Chalk Mountain not identified. How was a critical component like an access overlooked in the county permitting process? Is the county willing to review this issue because they're afraid of Mercer-Fraser's attorneys? Chalk Mountain Ranch, Mercer-Fraser, and the state of California, CAL FIRE, have an ongoing legal dispute. The ongoing legal dispute does not relieve the county of its responsibilities to enforce the approved permit conditions. Suspend the CUP until a complete and thorough review has been conducted. Mercer-Fraser is a general contractor known for road construction. They can build their own road on their own property under the permit the county has already issued. And I have one final question for you. Are there no consequences for a 5-year-old Mercer-Fraser invoice for the CUP issued with the 30-day payment terms in the amount of $5,559 still sitting on the books? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else in the room approaching the podium who wishes to comment, so we're going to go to move online and calling in. As a reminder, *9 to raise your hand, and then when I call on you, it'll be *6 to unmute, and we are on item D, public comment on non-agenda items. So if you're here to speak about the public hearing, or not the public hearing, excuse me, the public workshop item tonight, that'll be a little bit later. Right now, we're doing non-agenda items, so I'm going to go ahead and move to folks who have their hands raised online, and I'm going to call on Sienna Nelson first. You have 3 minutes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I am not sure if I was supposed to raise my hand. I am entering this meeting because I applied for a subdivision with the county.
Okay, I think,
Was the-
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you right there because it sounds like you are on the agenda under consent items.
Okay.
And so right now we're taking items that are not on the agenda, and you are on the agenda. So we're on item D right now, and you are item E2, so we will take you up shortly. And just so for the public, if they're not familiar, the consent agenda is typically done in one vote, so only raise your hand if you want the item pulled from consent and for us to consider it separately when that time comes. Okay, so I'm going to move back to public comment on non-agenda items. I'm not seeing anybody else with their hand raised at the moment.
There is, Chair.
Oh.
It is 3053. We already allowed them to talk.
Great. 3053, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? I
Yes.
just want to make sure you can hear me there in the chambers.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Thomas Mulder here. Just calling in. I did sit up there with some of you beforehand, and I like to follow because land use in Humboldt County is important to me as a grandfather that prays the overregulation doesn't drive my child or my children and my grandchildren out of the community. I followed your last meeting, and it was really sad. It sounded like there was potentially evidence that was not submitted by the applicant. And I felt it really unfortunate that when that information was brought to light, that the commission did not continue to a date uncertain. I know in the past when information there's known of information that could potentially look at things from a different perspective. They always allowed that opportunity for applicants to submit that information, or people that are opposing. That's always there as well. But it's just really unfortunate that didn't happen. And the other thing that I just rewatched the video clip this evening, and it was really challenging that there was a commissioner that stated it was very clear to them before the hearing and at the hearing that there wasn't enough evidence. So I want to remind the commission, there's a lot of important projects possibly coming forward, a big hot button item that there's been multiple meetings on. So if you make a perceived bias or an opinion before a hearing, that's unfair to the applicant, and probably should not be making the decision on that potential project. So always appreciate everyone, always appreciate all the reading and all that kind of stuff, but remember, fair and unbiased hearings are very, very important to the public process, and please don't overregulate us. I don't want to see my grandchildren move out of the community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else with their hand raised online. So we're going to go ahead and close public comment on non-agenda items and move to item E, the consent agenda. Items within the consent agenda are routine in nature and usually approved by a single vote. I'm going to poll the audience and members of the commission to determine if any item on the consent agenda should be pulled for public comment or further discussion. So I'm going to read off each of the items one by one, and if you would like the item pulled, please raise your hand. What that really means is that we'll consider the item separately after we vote on this item. Items that are on the consent agenda are all considered in one group with no staff presentation and typically very little commission discussion because they're considered routine in nature. So we're going to start with item E1. Would anybody on the commission like to pull this item? E1 is the review and approval of the June 18, 2026 action summary. Would anybody in the audience or online like to pull this item? As a reminder, star 9 to raise your hand. Okay, not seeing anyone. Item E2, the Sienna Nelson parcel map subdivision. Would anybody on the commission like to pull this item? Would anybody in the audience or online like to pull this item? Okay, not seeing anybody. And those are the only two items on consent. So they will both stay.
I'll move to accept the items on consent as proposed by staff.
I'll second that.
Okay. Let's go. Any discussion? Let's go ahead and have a voice vote. All of those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion passes. So we were just on item E, and I think maybe we just have a mislettering on it. We were skipping to item G, public hearings, correct? Oh, there it is. I was like, I know we have an F somewhere. There we are. Thank you. It's not missing. I just didn't see it. Okay. So we didn't have anything pulled from consent. So we're going to go ahead and go to item G, public hearings. And the one and only item on our docket tonight is G1, a public workshop on the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. Staff is going to...
Yeah, we're going to give a presentation, and I'm going to just, this is the update of the Humboldt Area Plan. So it's been 40 years since this was originally drafted and comprehensively updated. There was an update in 2016 and then again in 2022. And so what we have done, and Ms. Meehan will explain all this tonight, but we've provided 2 attachments that shows the red line changes that we went through in terms of changing it, and then we just comprehensively rewrote it to consolidate discussions into one section so that it's not, the same thing's not discussed in 3 different places. And so it looks different, but what we've tried to do is to have complete transparency by including the iterative red line drafts, and so those are there for your review. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Meehan, and hopefully she has the presentation up. Okay.
And just for the public's interest, so staff is going to do a presentation that is high level, and then we'll have an opportunity for the commission to ask questions of staff, and then we will go ahead and open up the public comment, and that'll be the time for the the public to be able to comment on this item and give us their feedback. And once public comment is done, we'll take it back to the commission, and we'll move through the document front to back and be able to get a little bit more into the weeds and the details on specific pages and topics.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Rianne Megan, and I will be presenting on the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. As Director Ford said, the Humboldt Bay Area Plan was certified and adopted by the Coastal Commission and Board of Supervisors in 1982. We are now working with the California Coastal Commission to comprehensively update this document, and it is a local coastal program which regulates over 21,000 acres of the Humboldt Bay area, and we are presenting a reorganized proposed draft. So our agenda for this workshop will be, I'm going to give a quick presentation, then I will open up the attachment 3, the PDF of the workshop draft. If there's any quick questions, then we'll move to public comment, and after public comment, we can go section by section with the commission, go into policy, and discuss as much as the commission would like. Core topics of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan update are sea level rise, tsunami, environmental justice, and tribal history. We wanted to add this to the Humboldt Bay Area Plan because of how important the Humboldt Bay is and its history with tribes, and acknowledge that it is WIGI. Revise urban limit lines, address consistency between land use and zoning, and update coastal dependent industrial. For the consistency between land use and zoning, there are some landowner requests and removal of overlays that are no longer applicable, such as urban reserve. Those areas now do have services, though the urban reserve is no longer applicable to them. We are able to present the proposed changes. If the commission would like, we would like to workshop the Humboldt Bay Area Plan document first, though, if possible. Previous meetings, we met with the community via Zoom on Tuesday, February 17th, and that was to re-engage the community with the project. It has been open for a while. There was a change in staff, and we just really wanted to get it back on everyone's mind. Then we released the public draft on June 1st and hosted a meeting via Zoom again on June 17th to go over the public draft with the community, allow them to answer some questions informally, and just get an idea of what the community would like to see with an updated Humboldt Bay Area Plan. On Tuesday, July 7th, we had a Zoom meeting again to address concerns regarding the Samoa Town Master Plan. We received a lot of public comments regarding the Samoa Town Master Plan and felt it was needed to talk with the community and assure them that we are not making changes to the Samoa Town Master Plan, and I'll go into that in another slide. There are 3 drafts of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. Attachment 1 to the staff report is the Humboldt Bay Area Plan public draft. This was released to the public June 1st and was available for comment from the public June 1st through June 30th. And that is a red line strikeout track changes version of the current adopted and certified Humboldt Bay Area Plan. Attachment 2, Humboldt Bay Area Plan public draft, is going to be the same as attachment 1. However, any changes from that draft are highlighted in a light blue color just to show the public and the commission that what we are changing and what has changed since the last time we released a draft. Finally, attachment 3 is going to be version 2. We're calling it version 2 because it is reorganized, and that is the workshop draft. We will be working on that one today. The adopted Humboldt Bay Area Plan organization needed some TLC, and we wanted to bring that up and ideally improve the flow of the document, make it easier to read for planners, anyone in the community alike. So the workshop draft is reorganized. We consolidated some sections such as recreation and recreational visitor serving. Those were on completely different sections beforehand, and now they're close together. Clearly identify urban versus rural. Another thing of the previous, or the current draft, or my apologies, the current adopted Humboldt Bay Area plan is there's some redundancy on sections where it is urban recreational and rural recreational. They're saying the same thing. So we just combined those and made it clear if there was any difference in urban versus rural policies. We also added new chapters and sections such as Chapter 2, which is going to be the Tribal History and Environmental Justice chapter. A quick summary of the public comments we have received is we did receive some comments on decommissioning, if there is a decommissioning plan for port infrastructure. There is not, and that is due to the county does not permit port infrastructure. So how can we create or require a decommissioning plan if we are not the permitting agency? We had the public request for a hazardous sites overlay, and staff is looking into that and reviewing databases to see if we are able to create that for the next hearing. And then finally, salt marsh and existing diked agricultural lands. The public wants historical marsh to be restored, and we address that on policy 5A within the sea level rise section of the current workshop draft. Other comments we received regarded aquaculture, specifically shellfish industry and blue economy. There were comments on how the possible offshore wind industry may have been getting favored. However, when looking at aquaculture, that is currently principally permitted within coastal dependent industrial zonings. We'll get into the port overlay zone in a little bit, but we are not precluding aquaculture from, that's already a principally permitted use within coastal dependent industrial. And that is something that we have been discussing with Coastal Commission and working with them on as well. The majority of our public comments were regarding the Samoa Town Master Plan and the Port Overlay Zone. There were many comments concerned that we were changing the Samoa Town Master Plan, and we hosted the July 7th meeting to let the community know we are not changing it. We were proposing initially to remove some outdated policies that have already occurred in regards to the master parcels. However, we are not doing that, and that is shown in Attachment 2 and Attachment 3. So the only change is going to be the 2016 amendments that were already certified by the Coastal Commission and approved by the Board of Supervisors on April 26, 2016. For some reason, these were not included in the current published draft of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. We are unsure why, but those need to be included as they are approved amendments. So just want to reiterate, there are no changes being proposed to the Samoa Town Master Plan. And we are working with the community to help address their concerns and are working on other avenues to help them understand the Samoa Town Master Plan, as such as adding a webpage again to the county website and possibly doing a community meeting with them in the future as well. So for the Port Overlay Zone, there were a lot of requests on adding regulations for lighting, noise, height, and air quality. Within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, we are not adding those regulations or standards for the Port Overlay Zone. We are not creating a Port Overlay Zone within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. That will be a separate project completely. We are just creating the idea of a Port Overlay Zone, so when we can create and open that project to have the Port Overlay Zone, it is already within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. But once the Port Overlay Zone project is open, that will be the typical planning process where the public can submit comment and will be able to submit their input as well. And that would follow the standard practice of planning commission and board of supervisors, comment periods, all of that. So there will be time for the public to put in their comments on that. So we just want to make it clear we are not ignoring them on regulations. We have read their comments. We see why they would like regulations on these core standards. However, that is not the aspect of the Port Overlay Zone that we are addressing within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan update at this time. So now I'm going to open the attachment 3, the PDF version of the workshop draft, and identify the key changes. So that'll just be one moment. Later on, I will go through the workshop draft in Word. There was just some issues with the maps being presented, so I'm going to go through the PDF right now just so everyone can see the maps, and then later on when we're workshopping policies, I'll open up the Word documents so we can update those as we go. So I'm going to just scroll through to Chapter 1. All we did before that was cleaned it up, got rid of old references and updated it to show the current Board of Supervisors, current Planning Commission, and current staff that is working on this project. Any highlighted is stuff that staff will be going back to when they get closer to a final version of, or a final draft of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, because it's tied to organization and references to sections and chapters that may not be correct at this time. So this is the proposed new table of contents. There's no references to pages yet, as we are still working on the organization of that. Going into Chapter 1, this includes an overview of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, which is a local coastal program. We did combine chapters 1 and 2 from the original document, as this would provide a more comprehensive overview of the whole document and its relation with the Coastal Act. So some maps are attached. We are going to be working on these and providing higher resolution. We understand right now some of them are quite blurry, and we will be updating those to make sure that that isn't the case in the future. There were public comments from the first community meeting about wanting to see maps that show the different jurisdictions of the coastal zone. So we have included those, separated by north and south right now. And then there was public comment to include the categorical exclusions surrounding the Humboldt Bay area, so those have now been added. Chapter 2, Tribal History and Environmental Justice. We added this chapter. We wanted to show how important it was, not only to everyone that lives here, but, you know, really give a space for local tribes to include their voice in this document. We have reached out to local tribes numerous times, and we really would like this chapter to reflect their voice. Section 2.1, Tribal History, just provides an overview of the history of Wiki, which is the Wiyot word for Humboldt Bay, and just highlight its importance to specifically the tribal community. for environmental justice, we wanted to provide an overview of what environmental justice is and how disadvantaged communities are affected, and include some policies on hopefully how we can address environmental justice and provide less barriers for disadvantaged or break down barriers for disadvantaged communities. Going into chapter 3, this is where all the land use policies reside. We have simplified the discussion between urban and rural land use designations and consolidated land use discussions when possible. The biggest change in this chapter is going to be an update to coastal dependent industrial. There was some inconsistencies beforehand with the Coastal Act, and also it wasn't clear what was coastal dependent industrial and what was just industrial, so we wanted to really make that clear. So we have modified that in response, modified coastal dependent industrial in response to updates within the Coastal Act. And we also did update ESHA within that section because based upon our Nordic experience, our project the project we had with Nordic Aqua Farms gave us a lot to learn about and how the relationship between ESHA and coastal dependent industrial. So I'm going to just quickly speed through this. I apologize for anyone that may, actually I could just jump to the section real quick. Okay, going into chapter 4, this is a new chapter. This includes all the biological resources, policies related to natural resources, coastal resource protection, and we wanted to create this to distinguish it from the land use designations. We removed outdated content, updated ESHA once again, and included references from the general plan update in 2017. Another new chapter is going to be chapter 5, which is coastal hazards and adaptation. Most of these sections are new. So we have an overview of hazards, and then we go into geologic, seismic, tsunami, sea level rise, fire hazards, and flood hazards. And this was we once again updated this from the 1982 draft, removed outdated content, and then wanted to ensure consistency with the safety element, which was updated in 2017. And then I'm going to jump to chapter 6, which will be public access. Within public access, we removed outdated public access spots within the public access inventory, added a section that discussed trails within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan or that connected to the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. We are proposing to possibly make the access inventory an appendix. And finally, we created the Samoa Town Master Plan as its own chapter, which will be chapter 7. Once again, want to make it very clear, we are not changing the Samoa Town Master Plan. The only additions were the 2016 amendments, and then we did include exhibits 25 and 25A as those were missing in the published document, and they're referenced throughout the published document. And then the final chapter is definitions. Once again, just updated those, got rid of outdated content, added new terms that were needed, and that concludes my brief overview of the changes.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll take it to commission questions regarding the staff presentation or bigger picture questions. Commissioner Curriasi?
I have a question regarding the Town Master Plan. I know you mentioned that you're not proposing any changes. That's understandable, but there's also, we've received a lot of public comment. Is this opening of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan an opportunity to make changes? Is staff considering that type of input?
It certainly is a opportunity. I think one of the things that you see going on out there right now is there are some things that are unrelated to the plan that the community's upset about. And I don't know that changing the plan is going to fix that. And so I think that want to be very cautious about reactions and starting to change the plan in response to things that have happened in the past. And the real question is the plan as it's currently envisioned adequate to address the future development of that area?
Commissioner McFarland?
Thank you for going through that. I know that was probably a lot for you. I was wondering on the last slide of your presentation, you mentioned that lighting and you had 3 other things were not an aspect of the port overlay zone that we're addressing now. So I don't know if I misheard that, but that implies there are aspects we're addressing. So if that's true, then why are we not addressing those 4? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So there are things in the zoning ordinance that the port can't comply with as it's currently being envisioned. And we're not trying to change the Humboldt Bay Area Plan and all of the zoning around the bay to address a specific need. So what we're saying is that when the port wants to come through, they can apply for this overlay zone, and then that would be able to address building height, structure height. I think those are probably the 2 big, and lighting. Those are the big things from a zoning standpoint. The things that we did incorporate into the Humboldt Bay Area Plan are some different ways of looking at ESHA. Because one of the things we did in Nordic is that there was a small patch of dark Gilia that was behind the buildings. We moved the building over a little bit. Dark-eyed Gilia is a listed species. It does great in environments that change. So what we did is we preserved this patch in an area that now will have development all around it, so it won't have the sand blowing, it won't be changing. And the question is will that really survive there? Or would it have been better to relocate it into a dune environment and set that aside for permanent mitigation, preservation, and enhancement? And so those are the things that the port overlay does address within this document. But in terms of the zoning items, it does not address that in this document. And we don't really want to address that in this document because that's a whole different level of environmental review, if I can be blunt.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not that we won't address it, it's just that those items would be addressed when something comes forward at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not changing this plan to completely accommodate everything the port will need. we're creating the opportunity and the pathway for them to ask for that in the future.
To clarify, we heard some public comments around noise with the port also. That would be a part of the port overlay discussion in the future.
Be part of the port overlay discussion. Is going to have to be part of the EIR analysis that looks at the, the interface between the different land uses out there and the impacts of noise and the impacts of a fairly active facility.
The EIR analysis of that specific project and not to do with what we're
Correct.
considering tonight.
Correct.
Yes, I have a quick question. You ran over it real quick and I wasn't able to find it, so I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit more on policy 5A in regards to the conversion of ag land to some restoration.
You want to? We could pull it up now, or we could really tear that apart when we get into the policy discussion.
Let's do that then.
Okay.
So I heard a lot of what we're not doing, and then I did catch a few things that we were doing, like, adding the tribal section, new maps, updated definitions, adding the April 26 amendments. What would you recap as the major things we are trying to change? Because a lot of it was, well, we're not going to do this and we're not going to touch that, but what would you, other than what I just probably recapped, is there a summary sort of what's the goal
I think
here?
that in the core things, that slide that was like maybe the third slide that this man presented, sea level rise.
What was it?
Sea level rise is important. Tsunami is important. The whole section on hazards, which gets into wildfire, tsunami, sea level rise, flood conditions. That's all been completely added.
They weren't in there before.
No. I mean, there were policies in there, but they have been greatly expanded.
Commissioner Curriasi?
Thank you. Can you, just going back to the port overlay discussion again, and I know you had addressed it, can you, I guess I'm asking, can you repeat what you had said in your presentation around the process of how the port overlay zone will be addressed?
So in the future, probably at this point, the Harbor District will need to apply for a rezone to apply the port overlay to their property. That rezone will identify all the things that they need to deviate from in terms of what the existing zoning allows. And we'll ask to probably be able to implement the policies that are in here relative to ESHA. And so then that process will begin. And I'm not quite sure how soon they're going to apply for that, but it'll be, the environmental work on that will be based upon the EIR that they're doing for the port. And so that will be the environmental analysis that evaluates that. And then obviously the Planning Commission. There'll be public meetings. Then there'll be public hearings. And the Planning Commission will weigh whether or not those things are appropriate to add into the zoning. And will then make a recommendation to the board. And the board will weigh whether or not those things should be adopted as part of the zoning for the site.
And would that involve any additional changes to the Humboldt Bay Area Plan at that time?
We're not envisioning that right now. By creating the port overlay, it kind of says, okay, if you can go through this process and do that.
Okay.
Unless there are, some of the environmental policies are things that they can't comply with in this, then they'd need to modify the Humboldt Bay Area Plan.
Is it safe to say that for those items that CEQA typically addresses, you're intentionally leaving those out to rely on CEQA to address those? In terms of, for example, comments around protecting existing uses or aquaculture or things of that nature?
Well, we believe that aquaculture is already being protected. as Ms. Meehan pointed out, number one, we do not have any regulation over anything in the water. That's either the Harbor District or the Coastal Commission. And then fundamentally, we won't have any regulation over the approval of the heavy lift terminal for the offshore wind facility, because there's a state law that says that onshore facilities for offshore wind will be under the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission. So the only thing we've got there is whether or not it complies with zoning. And that's where the port overlay comes in. And that then allows the county to weigh whether or not it wants to allow structures of that size and those things to occur.
That all makes sense. I think one other clarifying question related to that would be, I would argue that development in that zone, because it's a neighbor of the water, has the potential to impact that water, even though the county doesn't have jurisdiction there. So would the CEQA process for the overlay zone sufficiently address that, or would we need to consider that?
I would submit that the EIR for the heavy lift terminal itself needs to evaluate that. And therefore, that needs to be part of the port overlay. But there's an interface there that's kind of interesting, because we don't have jurisdiction within a certain number of feet of even the water. So a lot of that is completely out of the county's control. So what the county's going to be doing, I would anticipate, is providing comments on what we believe needs to be done to protect the water quality, to protect the aquaculture industry of Humboldt Bay. And the aquaculture industry, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a minute, because this has been one of the tensions we've been having with the Coastal Commission staff, is that in most other places, aquaculture is treated as an agricultural use. But in the Humboldt Area Plan, it's traditionally been treated as a CDI use, because it's coastal dependent, it's dependent upon the water. And so the things, again, in the water, we don't have jurisdiction over, but the things that happen on the land, that's where our jurisdiction is. So we've been treating that very much as an important protective use for the economy of the Humboldt Bay region.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Levy?
You know, I'll just leave it at this. I totally take your point and appreciate clarifying that we are not creating the port overlay zone, and we shouldn't get into the weeds of what it might say when it comes. But just to the extent that it's referred to in this document at a sort of high-level framing, when we do go line by line, I think we'd like to discuss that section and that phrasing.
You should.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to jump in with a couple of questions. I think I know the answer, but for the public's edification and to make sure I understand, can you talk about this document's approval process and how the Coastal Commission's participation and how that impacts timing and how this document will eventually look?
Yes. You want to do it?
I could give it a shot. So yes, we are currently working with the Coastal Commission. They received the public draft that was released to the public on June 1st, and attachment 2 also incorporated the Coastal Commission's comments as well as comments we received from the public. This is a workshop, but once it goes through the hearing process, Planning Commission hearing, Board of Supervisors hearing, then it will be submitted officially to the Coastal Commission. They will be able to have their time with it. Right now, we're forecasting decent amount of months. And once it gets past their approval process, it'll go back to the board and get adopted with any changes that the Coastal Commission needed in order for them to get their approval from their side. That's a brief overview. John could probably add more details to
I
that.
would just add in the dates that we are contemplating. After this, we expect the Planning Commission of the public to give us some homework, and so we'll take and do that homework. And then we plan on scheduling this for a public hearing on September 3rd. And, you know, there may be another public hearing with the Planning Commission after that. There may be more workshop, but this is, you know, what we've tentatively looked at. Because what we'd like to do is sometime shortly after the first of the year is get this into the hands of the board. And that's taking into account that, you know, nobody likes to do things of this magnitude over the holiday season. So that period between the end of November and the end of the year is kind of a bad time to be trying to do this. So we don't plan on introducing it to the board during that period. So, you know, that's, and then we need to have this done by the end of '27. So that gives the Coastal Commission almost a year to work with it.
And my understanding is they often take 6 months to a year to get through a document like this and provide a review. Okay. I was just thinking of that in terms of how that, and the Harbor District for the Port Overlay Zone would need to have this certified by the Coastal Commission and back adopted by the board before they could bring the Port Overlay Zone forward?
It could be processed before then, but it couldn't obviously be adopted or approved. And it's really also going to be dependent upon when they're able to complete their environmental document, because we've got nothing to act on in terms of CEQA without that being done.
That's helpful, thank you. I'm curious, the coastal dependent industrial lands have been such a conversation among the years, not just at the county, but among like other jurisdictions who also have coastal dependent industrial lands, and that they've been underutilized. Did you explore reducing the coastal dependent industrial zoning at all? Because like a lot of what could happen in coastal dependent industrial zoning could also happen in industrial zoning. It just would not be as restricted. Was that something that staff considered?
Well, one of the things we focused on was looking at where the areas of deep water channels would be, or water channels would be, and really that should be the focus of where the CDI is. So we're looking at taking other areas out of CDI that don't meet that criteria. And we can talk about the maps for that later. But so we are trying to really protect what we perceive to be a valuable resource, which is the ability to have access to deep water.
Do you expect the Coastal Commission to push back on reducing the CDI lands at all?
I think with the, you know, the justification that we've tried to give, I think it makes sense, and I think they've seen it. I haven't seen pushback on that.
Okay. Just mostly, I think it's been such a conversation over the years. It's more of a curiosity than a personal feeling one way or the other.
The other thing that is part of the CEI discussion, and again, sorry for the tangent, but is the temporary uses. Because so much of the CDI is underutilized and will continue to be underutilized for a period. We want to preserve the infrastructure that's there by allowing it to be used. And the county approved an ordinance probably 10, 11 years ago that allows these interim uses. And so part of the question is should we revamp that a little bit and make it a little more proactive in terms of how to renew uses, and if there's not a demand for the CDI land yet, should they be able to keep those non-CDI uses in place so that the buildings can be used? You know, there's income coming in to support the buildings, to repaint the buildings, to make improvements to the buildings. And I think that's probably a change we're going to be bringing forward at some point in the future to make a slight tweak to that. Right now, it's you get 7 years, you get a 3-year renewal, and you're done. Well, some of our folks out there are approaching that. And the question is do we want them to be done when they've been viable uses for 10 years and there's not CDI uses beating down the door to push them out?
That's really helpful. Thank you. That's a lot of my curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions from the commission at this time, so let's go ahead and move it to public comment. So at this time, we're going to take public comment in the room first. If you would like to make public comment, please approach the podium and form a line so that we can move through folks quickly. And if you are online or calling in, please go ahead and raise your hand right now so that we can see you and know that you're interested in commenting when we come to you. There can be a little bit of lag in the video that you're seeing of us, and so it's helpful for you to raise your hand now so that I catch you and know that you have your hand raised. And it's star 9 to raise your hand. So with that, our public commenters will each receive 3 minutes to comment on this item. So please approach the podium.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you, John. Thank you. My name's Dave Jeanette. I've been a Samoa resident now for 4 years. I think the outpouring of comments from Samoa was largely due to a consequence of timing. We'd all learned, I think, through a slip of the tongue by Natalie at a meeting that Danco was planning a new low-income housing project at the Samoa block, which they'd been telling us and every new homeowner that it was going to be a market and retail. So they put plans up on their website, and then this document came out. So we assumed that all these changes were due to Danco wanting to build this building, which we didn't know about. So I think that's why there was the outpouring of comments from our community. That said, I appreciate that there are no new changes. However, this document was made in 2016, as you said. There were 0 homeowners in Samoa in 2016. There were some renters, long-term renters as well. This is a completely new document to us. I did my research on the community. There was very little out there. Perhaps this plan existed somewhere on the county website, but it was impossible to find. I dug as much as I could. I have a folder of everything I could find at the time that I bought my house. So to treat this as no new changes, I think is unfair. And I want to address, John's comment that opening up the document might not be the right thing to do at this time because it wouldn't address our concerns. Yes, we have a lot of concerns. We have the 100-some new houses on the ocean side that are going to be built by Danco. We have the heavy lift marine terminal, and then we have this potential new low-income housing project right in the middle of what was supposed to be our town square. But to Mr. Karasi's point, sorry if I mispronounced your name, but this is the perfect time to open this document, get community input, and set up protections for us. So this is actually a community that people will want to live. We have over 100 homeowners now, I think, more houses coming online all the time. Massive construction and infrastructure projects have been happening all 4 years that I've lived there. Yes, I think our houses were sort of underpriced for the market because Danco promised us 4 years ago, it's going to be done in 2 years. That's what they've been telling people for, 10, 15, 20 years. So, there's not a lot of information. It's great that we're having these meetings, that this document is out there. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the time now to look at this document because we are going to, be putting something in place that hasn't been updated in a decade. So if it's not going to be updated for another decade, then potentially now is the time to meet with the new residents, the new homeowners, and help us make Samoa somewhere that Humboldt County can be proud of, that people want to visit, that people want to live. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Van Ryn. I work for Humboldt Waterkeeper, and I wanted to thank you all for this opportunity to comment on this really exciting update to this document. As you all have heard me comment on before, I'm going to talk about outdoor lighting. There's really not a lot of mentions or regulations on outdoor lighting in the coastal zone in this document outside of the Samoa Town Master Plan. So we're just asking that the language that was put into the coastal outdoor lighting ordinance be integrated into the HBAP with the edits that the Coastal Commission recommended, which would be the spaces only being lit when they're actively in use or for safety needs, limiting the lit area to the portion of the property that is engaged in that activity, having all the outdoor lighting be shielded and directed downwards and not towards ESHA or upwards, and then having a color temperature limit of 2,700 kelvins or less, which is the ideal color temperature for migratory birds. And then residential lighting not exceeding 1,100 lumens and commercial lighting not exceeding 3,200 lumens. And these are all recommended by Dark Sky International. In addition to those, I did want to comment briefly on the port overlay zone. I do feel like I have a much better understanding of how it's working in this document and how it'll work in the future, should the opportunity arise to integrate some more of the regulations into the HBAP, whether it be for the public's peace of mind or for us to all know that in the future some limitations will be placed on that overlay zone. As it stands, it's a little bit concerning the way that it sounds, almost like it's going to streamline permitting for the port rather than be another opportunity to look at it in more depth. So we're really hoping that more clear policies can be integrated to identify the need to require avoidance, minimization, and mitigation of impacts to our unique natural resources, and then having clear environmental performance standards at the planning level to facilitate with that future overlay zone process. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rod Gonzalez. I'm a resident of Samoa. I live right on Bayview Avenue, and I agree with everything Dave had to say, but I do want to make a comment. When I purchased my house, you know, and I will admit maybe I didn't do my homework, but I had the realtors sell me on an idea that this community was going to be a beach community. It was going to historic community. They're going to leave the buildings just the way they were. And my concern is now that the low-income homes that are going to go there, how they're going to affect the traffic. And it's just, I feel like they deceived me, and I feel like a sacrificial lamb. So does many of the residents there. That the power of the heavy lift marine terminal, Danco, and all these decisions being made without us having a chance to vote on it. And I want to ask, you know, do we have the option to vote on stuff like this with Danco is now presenting this low-income housing, advertising it, and he hasn't pulled a permit yet for it. I've asked the planning department to inform us when he does pull the permit, but my question is, what rights do we have to vote against him building this? And I'm asking this question to all you guys. Do you have any influence on overseeing this? And that's my comment for, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if you were expecting a response, but we don't typically respond to questions in public comment, so but thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thanks for informing me.
Yeah.
Hello, Commissioners. Jennifer Calt with Humboldt Waterkeeper. Humboldt Waterkeepers really strongly supports removing onshore support facilities for offshore drilling for oil and gas, as the workshop draft does, removes that as a principally permitted or conditional use in the MC land use designation. But we're really concerned about the addition to the port overlay zone, which was added just on Friday, that says, in addition to offshore wind support, it would also include other permitted heavy lift port operations. That's on page 57 of the workshop draft. And, you know, this is other heavy lift terminal operations are not anything that are even being speculated upon right now. And so we're really concerned that closing the door on one really heavy industrial extractive industry that would be devastating to the bay and our coast would just be replaced potentially with another one, which we don't even know if there is such a thing yet. The Humboldt Bay Area Plan can always be amended in the future, so there's really no reason to open the door to this kind of use right now. I also wanted to point out that the riparian and wetland protections are somewhat inconsistent with the county streamside management ordinance, which was updated during the general plan update. So For example, in the draft before you on page 91, it uses the term stream transition line, which was stricken from so that's just one example of how there are some inconsistencies there, and I hope the Department of Fish and Wildlife can help guide, making it consistent. Lastly, I would like to put before you the consideration that the agriculture section that starts on page 70 of the workshop draft doesn't address aquaculture, but the Coastal Act states that aquaculture is considered a form of agriculture, and aquaculture facilities and land uses shall be treated as agricultural facilities and land uses in all planning and permit issuing decisions governed by this division. So this is really important because there are some, the shellfish growing areas are below the high tide line. So yes, they will be impacted potentially by anything that happens on land, as one of the commissioners pointed out. But also there are some aquaculture facilities such as the Hog Island Hatchery that is within the county's jurisdiction. And they're all, I think, on MC zone land. So, there's a lot of conflict there between industrial uses and aquaculture. So please address that in the agriculture section. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else in person interested in making a comment. So I'm going to go ahead and move to online and by phone. As a reminder, please raise your hand now if you'd like to comment on this item. And it is *9 to raise your hand if you're calling in. I'm going to go ahead and start with Christopher Wilson. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me pull it up. I have something already written that I'd like to say. Hello, commissioners. My name is Christopher Wilson. I am a single father and resident at the Phyllis Rex Townhomes. I've been living here since about 2023. I don't know a lot about this. I've been keeping tabs on it as much as I possibly can. Finding out that it's a 10-year-old project, I'm very curious as to how this benefits our county and why we would destroy our natural ambiance, our migratory bird area. Before I go into what I wrote, I feel like the land acknowledgement is very much lacking. It doesn't address the Indian Island massacre that occurred, and it does not do service to this area right here, especially just where the bridge is and the bird sanctuary here. So I will do my due diligence to figure out what's going on with environmental protocols. But I'm here tonight to represent the residents here, the 80-some families here that live at the Phyllis Rex, and also the neighboring community of homeowners here in the Danco houses. I'm speaking tonight about the HPAP draft and the proposed port overlay zone. I support updating the Humboldt Bay Area Plan to address offshore wind infrastructure. However, the port overlay zone must be strengthened to protect the people who will live closest to the heavy lift marine terminal. The Phyllis Rex Townhomes, 80 units of affordable family housing that opened in 2020, share a property line with the project site. Many residents are young children, including my own, with ACE scores and other behavioral problems and limitations. We also have the Peninsula Union Elementary School is also nearby. There are sensitive receptors that require the highest level of protection. The June 5th, 2026 technical memorandum from Karstens, Black, and Mintier LLP to Core Hub lays out exactly what the EIR must do. I urge you to amend the port overlay zone and its implementation measures to require the EIR to follow those standards. Specifically, the EIR must establish accurate noise baselines at the townhome's property line. The basketball court, old townhomes, and the elementary school measured at multiple times of day and across seasons. Fully analyze impulse noise, which causes greater hearing loss and health impacts than continued noise. And I'll speak personally, just from the trucks that have been here recently, it is very much a real effect, and it does have physical.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off at 3 minutes. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, next I see Justin Mojonier. Apologies about your butchering your last name. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Justin Mojonier. You got pretty close. Nice job. I'm with Hog Island Oyster Company, Sunken Seaweed, and I'm owner of Pacific Lake Sea Salt. I wear a lot of different hats, and they're all centered around coastal dependent food production around Humboldt Bay. And each of these businesses are dependent on the clean water and healthy ecosystems we uniquely have here in Humboldt Bay. Humboldt Bay produced over 50% of all California's market product oysters. We produced 450 million shellfish seed, flying 100 plus farms from Southern California to Alaska. We have one of the largest flake sea salt producers in the country and one of the only seaweed farms in California. Coastal dependent food production is aligned with local community values to preserve our local ecosystems, and it aligns with the newly published California statewide action plan to develop and expand aquaculture that just passed OPC in the last couple days. Even though the Humboldt Bay Area Plan doesn't directly cover in-water use, decisions made in this plan for upland facilities have large impacts on the coastal dependent food producing industries. We're regulated by CDPH strictly by uplands only, not just current operations, but worst case future uses. I request you look into coastal food production overlays placed over vacant coastal dependent industrial, or just changing those industrial uses, restricting wastewater and stormwater discharge. That would not only help support aquaculture, but also our local ecosystems. And I urge the county to continue to protect and support growing sustainable industries like aquaculture instead of chasing large industrialized dreams. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised online. So we are going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it. Oh, okay. I see another hand that popped up. I'm going to call you just a second and give one last reminder. If you want to make a comment on this item online, please raise your hand now. *9 if you're calling in. J-Phone, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi there. Hope everyone can hear me all right. My name is Jesse Lopez. I'm going to try adding a second headphone in. I'm a Samoa resident, and I've been here for the past 2 years. I would just like to encourage the consideration to adopt some noise limitation in the port overlay zone, as well as lighting standards, as well as considerations that help protect the Samoa residents with the Samoa Town Master Plan parcel merger, to help keep them with the, provide a town center as was previously promised to us. I agree with all of the previous comments left by Dave and Rod as well. Leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing nobody else with their hand raised, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to the commission for discussion. And I think we will start with staff opening up the documents that they'd like to go through. Commissioner Curriasi.
I have a quick question regarding the current lighting ordinance. Does that lighting ordinance not currently apply to zones in the Humboldt Bay Area Plan?
It is currently going to go to the board on July 28th, and that is to adopt it. There was some modifications when it got approved by the Coastal Commission. So now we just have to adopt it, and we will be doing that July 28th. From there, we were planning on referencing the lighting ordinance. It's just we were waiting for it to get adopted before we start referencing it within the document.
I haven't followed it since it left our purview. Have there been many substantive changes since we considered the item?
Only
Yeah,
one big one.
The primary change is that the Coastal Commission required the change of light color to a warmer light for all lights, shielded and unshielded.
Okay.
Also, I'm wondering if it might be worth bringing back up now as a higher level discussion, bringing back up the comment by Director Ford about the aquaculture discussion and how Humboldt County treats that as a coastal dependent activity versus the commenter pointing out that the Coastal Commission requires seeing it as agriculture.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you heard from, I think, Justin Mounier, and asking to really protect the coastal dependent industrial. And there's a lot of food production that occurs within CDI that is coastal dependent food production. And so we were not inclined to change that and make it an agricultural use. As Ms. Colt was talking, I was wondering whether or not, you know, we should address it somehow as an agricultural use, because as sea level rise occurs, there may be the opportunity to have other kinds of agricultural uses that is food production, that is really aquaculture. And so we're fully interested in exploring that. I think that would probably be appropriate. But in terms of changing things to rezone the CDI, where they're already at and they're already functioning, they're already producing food, and frankly have been and are a growing part of our economy, I would be concerned about, you know, changing that dynamic. I was curious, you didn't ask this, but I'll just say this anyway, is that it did strike me that perhaps some better water quality measures would be beneficial to protect the aquaculture that's occurring in the water. And I thought that was a really good comment.
Commissioner McFarland.
As I understand it, the Port of San Diego regulates their aquaculture in their, like, I think it's called like shellfish and seaweed action plan for their blue economy zone. They regulate them as both coastal dependent and agriculture. So I'm wondering if we could look into classifying them as both, so you get the best of both worlds instead of picking just one.
Absolutely will, yeah.
Maybe one more general comment on Chapter 2, which I think is a great add on tribal history and environmental justice. And although one commenter maybe didn't read this section, it does cover, I just want to note that it does cover the Weot massacre in there. But I think I understood you to say something like, hopefully this reflects the voice of the local tribes, and maybe you could explain or expand on that, how they've been engaged, and if we actually do have their input into this section.
We have not gotten their input into this section yet. We have contacted individuals to review it and provide comment. We've sent it out to all the tribes to review and provide comment.
Okay.
We have not gotten comments back yet, and we do, using hopefully an appropriate word, covet their input, because really is about their history around Ouija. And
Right, so I was looking for some acknowledgement that they have reviewed and accepted this language. but-
No, absolutely. We just haven't gotten any response to
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
Please refrain from commenting in the audience.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one comment. I think scale matters, like when the comment about the project that's going to be a large project, and in the scale of all of these different industries or residential, agriculture, that they have to coexist and not allow one to come in and dwarf the other. Like if you said, okay, we're going to put a data center out there and it's going to take up half that bay, yeah, it might be industrial or, you know, but it shouldn't happen because it doesn't coexist with all of the other uses. And so you have recreational, you have tourism, you have agriculture, and it all has to be scaled so that one doesn't dwarf everything else. That's just my opinion. And I sympathize with, you know, all of a sudden something shows up. Too bad you didn't come to the meetings when we were discussing some of these projects, because it would have been nice to hear the community's concerns. But that's just my thoughts.
That does bring up another question that I had. I know that the Board of Supervisors is currently considering whether or not to ban data centers. If a data center application were to come forward today, or under the zoning that we're considering, how would it be principally permitted in any of the zones currently?
No. Data center is not an identified use anyplace. So it would fall under the category of a use of similar nature, but that would require conditional use permit. And to develop in this area and to develop any kind of new facility would also require a coastal development permit. So that would certainly require review, at least by the Planning Commission, maybe the Board of Supervisors on appeal, depending on where it is, perhaps by the Coastal Commission on further appeal. And I did want to say one thing to the comment that was made about the small block of residential affordable housing project. That would need to come to the Planning Commission. So if an application is submitted for that, when it's submitted, it'll go through their normal review process, it'll go through the environmental review process, and there'll be public notification and public engagement through that whole process before it ever gets here. And then obviously this is a public meeting. It would be considered at a public meeting.
When you say public notification, would you go by your typical public notification like standards, or would you try to widen your net since we have so much
at this
public
point,
interest?
many people within the town of Samoa have given us a kind of a distribution list of people that are interested in citizens. They would all be notified.
Thank you. I know that was a little bit of a digression from the topic we're talking about, but.
Well, I just actually wanted to ask Director Ford a quick follow-up, but because I'm not all that well versed on what's been discussed, proposed, opposed, whatever, in Samoa in that regard, but you said there is no application as of now.
There is no application. I think the thing that, if I'm a resident, that I'm troubled by is that if you go to their website, it shows a project there.
Okay. But not one that the county has had any chance to, you haven't even started a formal application process for this?
Correct.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
Okay, so I have pulled up the workshop draft. This is going to be the Word version. It is the same as the PDF version that was attached to the staff report. there may have been one or two sentences that, may not fall on the same page, but that's just due to formatting. So any page reference should coincide with this document. The maps are not in this document, but I could easily pull them up when needed. I can either just start scrolling and have the commission stop me, or if there's a certain section we'd like to jump to, whatever.
Just go down and go to the first section and then ask if there's questions, comments on that. We can do that and then just scroll down incrementally from there.
Okay, so chapter 1 is going to be overview and coastal act. I'm going to just start scrolling. Introduction, Humboldt Bay Planning Area. This just provides an overview of the topography and, the area itself.
Since I don't think have page numbers on your document, just periodically, could you reference generally where we're at, so I can make sure I'm keeping up?
Yes, I could actually add those numbers right now. I guess for some reason it didn't save in this draft.
Because what you're reviewing is the Word document, which is the same as the PDF of this attachment, correct? Okay.
Yes.
So if it says page 22 in our version,
Page 22 as well.
Got it.
I think it just didn't save the footer last time I added it, so I apologize for that. But yes, the page numbers should coincide. Coastal Act background, use of the document. We wanted to include this just for planners in the community provide a brief overview of, what is the local coastal program? Why does the Humboldt Bay Area Plan exist and its relationship with the Coastal Commission? Going into coastal jurisdiction. And this is where the north map would be, and that's the only difference between the PDF and the Word version.
I just had a question on the map. I don't know if it's just some of the lines are off, but it appears like there are small sections that are labeled inland that are in the bay. I don't know if it's just like.
Yeah. The reason it says inland is this is a jurisdiction map.
Uh-huh.
It's all in the coastal zone, but in certain parts of the coastal zone, we have the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And that's what's represented on the map.
So like we have.
There may have just been some GIS errors. I created the map from our GIS. We are going to have our GIS employee create better, higher quality maps. So that may just be the error right there, but I can definitely pull up the map as well. But it might have just been a slight mapping error in the sense of I was using a internet-based GIS at the time.
Okay. See what they come up with.
I guess Director Ford and I clarified some things. I think my request would just be maybe we run this map through Coastal Commission so that they can double check it with their historical maps before final.
We just need to modify it with our GIS system as
Perfect.
we don't have final maps yet. We tried to get some things done just to kind of show what's got to be shown.
I get it, yep.
And so, yeah, we'll fix it.
Cool.
We need to denote the island and the bay as being that's in the city. Well, I think it still is in the city of Eureka, even though it's been given to the WIA people. And then there's 2 points there that appear to be up near Arcata and down south of Eureka. And they don't have any marking on them, so it appears that they're inland, and they're not inland. I think it is.
Commissioner Scaville, your mic's not on.
I can pull up the maps if.
No, I think Director Ford knows what's going on. We're good.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to coastal act goals and policies. A key difference between the current published document and the first two drafts of the document is how coastal act policies are formatted. So going into the workshop draft, we just did a little gray box around the coastal act policies to distinguish that these are related coastal act policies. Yeah, just a formatting change, and then that way it is easily identifiable what is from the Coastal Commission, Coastal Act versus the county's policies.
I have a question about the exemptions. I'm curious why only single-family dwellings are exempt versus higher density residential if they're allowed in certain zones.
I can begin just by saying this categorical exclusion order is from 1986, but John can probably.
Yeah, I think what the exclusion order does is it's just basically exempts it from a coastal development permit. And I don't think that there was any intent in 1986 of exempting multifamily residential from that. We can, if the commission would like, we can revisit the categorical exclusionaries, and maybe that's part of the recommendation coming out of the Planning Commission to do that, to address some of these things. So.
To clarify that, excuse me, the categorical exemption was pondered during the 1986 development of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, or has it come from a different source?
It was done separately. So there's a resolution that was adopted and a document that was adopted by the Coastal Commission creating these. So it's not something we can change here. I think in the public meeting was asked for us to add that in, which is a little bit dangerous because it wouldn't be changed by modification to the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. It would require a change going back to a separate document. I know this is confusing, I'm sorry, but a separate document adopted by the Coastal Commission.
Does that document originate from the Coastal Commission, or did that document originate from the county and the Coastal Commission certified it?
I think it probably was initiated by the county at the time. And some of the things that should be in a categorical exclusion area and should be applied aren't. And, you know, I think it's appropriate to revisit that, because even in right now, a categorical exclusion area, you build a house under the categorical exclusion, but then you can't put an ADU behind it without getting a coastal development permit. That doesn't make sense.
I would be in support of revisiting that.
Yeah, likewise, although maybe leaving it up to staff whether it makes sense to roll it into this or to address it separately.
We can address it separately. In fact, maybe one of the things that would be helpful is at some point in the not too distant future is just to put a separate item on the Planning Commission's agenda and do a more thorough report on the categorical exclusion areas, explain them. And then, because there are other things other than just single-family residences, there's lot line adjustments and some things like that that also get that treatment.
Commissioner McFarland, did I see that you had a comment?
I was just going to agree with both of you and say I would support that as well.
So the next couple pages are blank. That's just placeholders for the maps. So I'm going to quickly scroll through those, but we will be approaching Chapter 2, which is Tribal History and Environmental Justice.
So I
I would volunteer to go through that section and make some recommendations, and if you don't get any from the tribes, at least it would sound a little better, because I worked for a couple of these tribes.
In the environmental justice section, we had a public comment that requested the addition of another environmental justice policy. I can quote it here if you'd like, if it's helpful, but I think you have it in your comments. The support the ability of people of all ages, abilities, incomes, and using all modes of transportation, including walking, biking, using mobility devices, and riding transit to access the coast. I'm in support of adding that, but I'm curious on staff's feedback.
Look at the screen.
Did it get? Oh, it got in there.
Brianne already added it in.
Thank you.
So, is there, I'm thinking out loud here, but is there any way or any language that needed to, or maybe it's fine as it is, but to sort of, what's the right word? Assist other agencies in, whether it's local or state agencies in prioritizing these areas for complete streets projects, if we're looking at this multimodal access, or I'm just off here?
I mean, it's something that can be used. One of the things that we noted was that where these probably are most affected are some of the areas that are subject to sea level rise, tsunami run up, and that sort of thing. And so probably a whole different set of things need to be considered in terms of how long do those remain viable housing, and can we be replacing that housing and relocating people?
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah.
Did we want to go back up to tribal history and workshop that, or is that?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to clarify, were you suggesting maybe we do that a little bit right now? Yeah, you're just saying that you.
I'll give you my
I'm sorry.
I'll give you my version, you don't have to use it, but if I
Great.
see something that doesn't look right.
Yeah, and I agree that's more appropriate because it gives the county time to hear back from the tribes that have.
Right.
And then, so we should just wait on that.
Thank you for clarifying. Is there any other comments or discussion on policies within environmental justice, or would we like to move to Chapter 3, which is land use and development?
My only question about, do we need in the policy sections, we had a public comment about it, and we heard it from Director Ford as well, that maybe we need to prioritize the water quality treatment. So like this would be like stormwater treatment. Do we need to add any, would it be beneficial to add any of that here?
We're going to look at that, and
Okay.
that'll be lower down. That won't be in these two sections.
Okay.
Can you look at, on the policies for environmental justice, section B, 1A, considering environmental justice and where applicable, equitable distribution of environmental benefits and impacts when acting on coastal development permit? Is that,
Yeah.
you understand what I'm saying?
If the commission's, in
Not all
agreement with that.
Projects have environmental
Yep.
benefits.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, personally.
Paragraph, sentence A, there. Where applicable, equitable distribution of benefits. I'm just looking to add the word impacts in there. Where applicable, the equitable distribution of environmental benefits or impacts when acting on a coastal development permit. Sometimes all the impacts can get put on one area.
Yeah, we were hoping we could slip that by, but you caught it. So.
Any others for this section?
Moving on to Chapter 3, Humboldt Bay Area Development and Resource Policies. 3.1 is just a brief introduction of the chapter. 3.2 is a general description of the area, and preparing this document today, I realized that we have this exact passage in 1.2, so that will be cleaned up to not be redundant. Moving on to plan designation standards and area plan maps. Once again, we will prepare area plan maps for the hearing. So this section will be updated and revised. We most likely will not be using these icons to distinguish those areas. Going on to urban development. And urban limit line.
Can you elaborate exactly on what the urban limit line is intended to do?
Yeah, so within the urban limit line is really to establish the area where there are utilities. And so that's where the more intense development is allowed.
Specifically, water and wastewater?
Water and wastewater, yep. And so part of that is to really say that, you know, you can't or shouldn't develop more intense development outside of that. The one exception to that is on the Small Peninsula, and that's the coastal dependent industrial areas. And then also the extension of the sewer down to Fairhaven in Finntown. And there's a specific exemption in there.
I think there was I think you had redlined out a reference to high density residential. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain why that is?
Because there's no high density zoning. And it's not used.
Okay, so you don't, so you, got it, okay. Well, I'm wondering, would we want to allow the potential for high density in the future should zoning change?
So medium density residential right now allows up to 30 units per acre. With a density bonus, you can go over that. So then the question would be, you know, is it appropriate within the Humboldt Bay Area Plan area and the areas that could be high density residential to go above that density?
I guess my argument would be yes, because the 101 corridor follows the coastline, and that's where I would imagine we would most likely see higher density development.
It's a policy decision. If the commission wants to put high density residential back in, that would be fine. And then if you want to allocate that on the map, we can look at doing that. We'd then have to create a new zoning district for high-density residential, which we currently don't have.
Can you specify which page we're looking at, or?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Levy,
Okay.
that's in one of the red line strikeout drafts. It's not here.
Well, which section then is it that we're talking about? Because I'm looking at both as well.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right now, and that'll give you a corresponding page number. I apologize that I don't know off the top of my head. So it'll be page 32
Okay, that,
of the
okay.
workshop draft. There was previously a
Got it.
RH,
Thank
residential high density.
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Curiosity, can you repeat again why you were in support of adding it in? I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, I guess just conceptually, I was imagining that where the county might want to see RH development would be along the 101 corridor, because that tends to be where majority of resources, businesses, jobs, et cetera, tend to coalesce around. And that 101 corridor follows along the coastal line, and it exists within this coastal jurisdiction. So I guess I'm a little, confused. I'm not entirely clear why we would omit it if we currently don't have any zones that allow RH. I'm assuming we'd want the ability for that in the future.
If that's what the commission wants, we can add RH back in and just kind of keep that there. That's fine.
I wouldn't agree with that. I mean, we've already discussed the tsunami and some of the hazards that are along that area, and high density is not compatible with that.
I think along the 101 corridor is a curious question, just looking at where the urban limit lines are and where it's sort of planned. I don't see many opportunities. I think I was more intrigued for high density, potentially in the Myrtletown area, as that's more close to urban infrastructure and similar to other higher density housing that we see within the city of Eureka over there.
I guess that's what personally I include that in the near. It's right next to 101.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner McFarland.
I am not saying no, but I'm also not saying yes, because if we're talking immediately along the 101 corridor, there are obviously sections that are going to flood in short time, but then there's also sections in the Eureka area where you only have to go like a block up and you're out of the tsunami zone. So in that area, I would support high density, but then there are areas that I wouldn't. So not to make this more complicated, but I would be open to a future discussion about, so rather than just blanket statement, the whole thing, high density, which areas are appropriate, I would be open to that.
So one of the things I would like to do is target this discussion on how deep you want to go. We can simply add high density back in as an option. And then if you want to take it to another extreme, is look at where that could be applied. But then that involves notifying people and greatly complicates this process.
Does omitting it from here make it even more difficult to open that up at some point?
Well, frankly, omitting it from here has little consequence, because for us to have a high-density zone, we have to change the zoning ordinance, which is a legislative act, and then we would change this at the same time, if that was what was required or desired. So we could leave it here as a placeholder so that someday we could create a high-density residential zone.
Looks like Ann wanted to say something.
I would just like to add that the Coastal Commission supported the removal. It may have actually been their comment that we responded to. They supported the decision to remove the residential high density, and I believe it was because there's nothing currently designated as residential high density, and there is no corresponding zoning within the coastal zoning or zone section of our planning code. So that's why we removed it. It was also coastal commission comments. I just wanted to add that.
I get that in their state, in their retained jurisdiction, but there are sections that are in the local jurisdiction that could be ripe for high density.
I'm just wondering if maybe the order of operations is that that's addressed towards a future zoning change and then comes back to the Bay Area plan to update the Bay Area plan and to align with that change.
I mean, it could be. We could just leave the reserve in there. And then, because there's clearly a statement of intent that we plan to use it someplace, and then we only have to deal with the zoning when that comes about.
I like that one.
I mean, 6 1, half dozen to the other, but it really depends on what you want to signal right now.
I definitely agree with Commissioner O'Neill and McFarland about the concern of sea level rise. It feels like signaling the intent doesn't mean we're building in areas at risk of sea level rise or tsunami impact.
We've already approved, like, the Danco project, that's in a hazardous area. So we do it all the time up here because we don't really understand the extent of those hazards, I don't think. So we're not necessarily not going to approve it.
I mean, I'll just chime in. I appreciate the spotlight on this and the comments you guys have made. I was initially kind of inclined to see it that way, like why would we be talking about high density development in this area? But as Commissioner McFarland really clearly stated a moment ago, there are, and you talked about Myrtletown, and there are places that are still within the Humboldt Bay Area plan that are actually out above the tsunami zone and really near or in the urban transit core. And I think those would be, that's not like building a high rise in Samoa or something. So I think that leaving just a place marker that there may be appropriate places for high density zoning down the road in areas within this plan, I would support that.
Is that a consensus?
No, you can vote on it, but I'm not in agreement.
I mean, it's a yes from me.
What if we included the residential high density, kept that there, and as part of the definition said it cannot be placed within an area subject to sea level rise or within a tsunami zone or a flood zone? So that it can only be placed in areas that are safe. If you wanted to take it a step further, you could identify transit corridors or something like that.
Can you pull up your map and kind of give me an idea of what we're talking about that would be appropriate?
I like that suggestion, Director Ford, if we can say the, 2150 high scenario, we can be the most restrictive on that, then yes.
We're about due for a break. Would it be helpful to take our break now so that you can finagle language, or should we wait to finish out this discussion?
You can just, whatever you want to do, you can just give it to us, and we're going to go finagle it later anyway, so.
Okay. We'll finish out our discussion then. Do you need a straw poll from us to get confirmation on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
And specifically talking about simply putting back the category of residential high density in the list of, not putting anything on a map at this time, but.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you mention a minute ago, there is a route to get there? through legislation and changing the zoning.
Yes,
So
there is.
Why are we trying to create another route if there's already a route in process?
If I could, I know this gets incredibly confusing, but the local coastal plan behaves, functions much like the general plan does. So there is a set of land uses that occur within the local coastal plan, i.e. the Humboldt area plan, and then there's zoning that is separate from that. Both are, to change one or the other, both are legislative acts. So if we were to say we're going to create the residential high-density zone in the zoning at some point and modify the local coastal plan to do that and apply it to a piece of property, we could do that basically as one hearing. On the other side of that, if the commission wants to signal that we are interested in seeing residential high density at some point in the future, you could leave it in the plan. You could give some framing around it, not within sea level rise, not within tsunami, not within a flood zone, not in a geologically unstable area, and preferably along a transit corridor, or it has to be along a transit corridor. Then it would kind of narrow down where it could possibly go. It's really, I don't know that it either way is better than the other. It really comes down to, I think, if you want to keep it in the plan, you're signaling that you would like to see at some point higher density residential developed within this plan in some place.
Can you define high density?
It's not, it would be over 30 units per acre, probably 30 to 50 units per acre.
And I think that some people who might live in some of these areas that you think would like, you know, would be suitable for high density probably don't want to see it in their area. Just because you might think Myrtletown is good, the people in Myrtletown might have a different opinion, and so that's where you're opening the door to, you know, because a developer is going to go, yeah, I want to do that, but the people that live there may not like it. Just like the people in Samoa didn't want to really see high density in their area. And I like where I live, and I don't want to change it to something that I came from. I grew up in Southern California, in the beach areas. I don't want to see that come here. That's just my opinion.
And there's a process to resolve that as well.
Yeah, there would be a public process for rezoning.
Right. This wouldn't rezone anything, but it's just, if the legislation to rezone comes forward, this will already allow a place to tie into it. I don't feel like that, you know, a great deal hangs on it either way, but I'm sort of leaning towards including it back as it was, just as a placeholder. But I don't want to. It's not worth causing a major schism on the commission over it, in my opinion. So.
But it's also an opportunity now to put some, you know, get some reins on it, because if we don't do it, then it could be rezoned and not include the list that.
No, you're right.
Or the tsunami and all that. So at least now we can, for future generations, put some sort of, I mean, they could change
Totally.
it, but.
I actually thought the way Director Ford phrased that, with like 4 or 5 just key things that it would not be compatible with, sounded pretty good to me. So
let's go ahead and do a straw poll on whether or not we have support for the director to, I think it's retain residential, high-density residential with the language that Director Ford added on to it, the sideboards. Am I capturing the idea appropriately that you were talking about, Commissioner Curiosity?
I think I'm struggling with sideboards. I understand the intent, but I'm struggling with why is it not appropriate for 40 units per acre, but it is appropriate for 30. And 30 is allowed in medium density. So I think I'm more interested in just signaling that interest to having that future discussion rather than diving in now at how we put in sideboards. I'd prefer to have that as a separate discussion.
Okay.
But I feel like there is a proposal by Commissioners McFarland and Levy, and I think we could take a straw poll to that.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a straw poll to that. All those in favor, please give me a thumbs up. Okay, I only see 3 thumbs up, which is not enough. And I would assume everybody else is a thumb. Oh, now we'll just do a thumbs down if you are not in support.
I don't think I have enough information to make a decision, so I'm just sitting here.
Okay.
Not
Well,
trying to decide.
I mean, I don't see enough support for it to be included. Do you want to try again with another straw poll, or are we moving on?
No, I think I really appreciate the conversation, and I think I would advocate for moving on.
Okay. Okay, well, with that, did you have one more thing, Commissioner Levy? Yep. Okay. I think it's a good time for a break. We're, I think, going to be pushing it to the end of our time tonight, so let's do a 5-minute break and come back at 8:06. Okay, I'm going to bring us back to deliberation, or not deliberation, but consideration of our document in the workshop. Yeah, Commissioner Curiosity?
Yeah, I was wanting to propose that rather than kind of feeling rushed to try to get through this document tonight, we just kind of assume we're going to continue this item. I think I've certainly felt this is a very dense topic. There's a lot here, and I could use the additional time. So just not feeling rushed.
Director Ford, do you need any sort of formal action taken for us to assume that right now, or can we just keep moving through the document and see where we get and assume that we're likely to continue our workshop and do an action at the end?
We can go ahead and continue it. I think we can go to August 6th. Yes, we will just continue it to August 6th.
Okay. And so we'll continue going through it tonight and make progress, and then come back on August 6th and take up anything that we haven't considered tonight.
May I just ask just a clarifying point? Since we're talking about continuing this discussion of these documents, there will not be new versions. We will be working off of the same one on August 6th.
On August 6th, we will not present new information, correct?
Great, because I mean, it's just, there's a lot here that most of us have not fully digested yet, so.
So the thing that means is that you go right into the discussion. There's no more public comment on it.
Sure, because it's not a new item. Yeah, right.
But the public could submit more written comments.
They can, yes.
Okay.
But technically, it should only be limited to new information.
Okay, so we left off near, we left off on a discussion that I don't think had a particular page number. Well, I think we were near page 40. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the urban limit line. Again, I am going to just quickly add the page number again because it disappeared.
Thank you for that. It makes it easier to follow along.
So okay, so going back to page 40, this is the policy section of urban limit lines and non-conforming uses and structures. This has been moved. It not only applies in urban limit lines, just forgot to delete it from this section, and we will make that more clear in a newer draft that non-conforming uses and structures does not just apply to the urban limit line section. Page 41 would be where the urban limit line map is. So moving on to urban land use designations.
I have a question that may be appropriate here. It may be something we discuss later. We had a comment from the folks, some folks who were interested in having sea salt production principally permitted in coastal dependent industrial. Is it currently principally permitted in coastal dependent industrial?
I think they're actually doing it right now. I don't think we required a separate permit. I think we treated it as a coastal dependent industrial because it is a form of aquaculture. I don't mind changing the definition of aquaculture to include that as a use.
They say, well, traditional aquaculture enjoys principal permitted use status in CDI and resource dependent zone. Sea salt extraction is currently omitted from the draft. So it sounds like they are principally permitted. It's just not explicitly clear.
I think that's fair.
Okay. Would it be, I think I'd be in support of just making it perfectly clear and including them in the list.
Agreed. We did hear from him tonight.
I'm in support of that. I'm curious, does it make sense? Are there other existing uses that we should be considering, or is salt production unique in a particular way where we should be mentioning it specifically?
Did that list that you read include seaweed farming?
It's not in that specific piece of the comment. We did also, I think, let's see, this is also from someone who, this is, Pacific flake and sunken seaweed. So they do seaweed farming and sea flake, but in that particular comment, it was just about sea
Both
salt
of those
extraction.
uses are existing currently.
Yeah, let's see.
I think somewhere along the line, we interpreted that they were permitted. We'll change the definition to make sure it's clear that they're permitted.
Yeah, if you could check out the number 1 of the comment letter from Justin Mojonier and Tori Polizzi.
Just have a quick comment. I would hate to see us starting to go down the rabbit hole where we're just defining what currently is a specific, whether it's sea salt or whether it's seaweed or it's just oysters. Further on down the road, there may be some other aquaculture that may be coming out of the bay that would be beneficial to the community and provide jobs and all this stuff. I just hate to see us pigeonhole ourselves to where, oh, well, it's not in there, so it's not a.
One of the things I was thinking as you all were talking was, rather than trying to list all the possible uses it could be, is to really develop a better use category that was descriptive of the kinds of activities that would be going on, and so that if there are things that could in the future come about, that those would be included.
And it could include, examples of that, but not limited to.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And further in his comment, I just didn't quite get to reading it all out loud. There is a suggestion to move to the definition being coastal dependent food production. So I think that may be getting at a broader category that might be more appropriate.
It could be food, it could be medicinal, it doesn't necessarily have to be food. It could be tourism related to those industries also.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I come back to urban limits, urban limit lines?
Yep.
We're not, these are all as existed in the former plan. We haven't really changed any of these, is that correct?
That is correct. We're not proposing to change anything because they're largely dependent upon where infrastructure is available. What's that? Because that was already done.
And on the map, the little, I'm assuming that must be College of the Redwoods down on the bottom or something.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
We can take a look at that.
We don't talk about that or the campus development or anything like that, but it's in this plan.
That it probably is intended to be College of the Redwoods.
I think it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we have that land use designation for whatever that is, College of Redwood site is?
I think the college is PF, Public Facilities.
Okay. Yeah, we do. Okay, thank you.
Anything else for the urban limit line?
This is not, it's not about that, but can I just put a comment out there? Because I acknowledge that I am still not familiar enough with this document to know exactly what the most relevant places for this comment would be, but I just thought that there were, we've had so many good comment letters. There were a lot of them, too many to cite, but one that just came in this week is from the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, which I thought raised a couple of pretty critical concerns, suggestions, requests, and I just thought that this might be a chance to talk about, when we get there, I would like to talk about that.
So I think we're currently in 3.4.3 urban land use designations. We talked a little bit about principal uses for a couple of the definitions. Is there anything else right now that we should be talking about, or is the commission okay moving on to the next section? So it sounds like we'll be moving on to the next section. Oh, Commissioner Carioli.
No, I was going to support moving on.
Okay, great.
After urban development, there is rural development. It is the same format as urban, where it's a description of overall rural development. There is the rural subdivision requirements.
Just that in your introduction, last paragraph, you've got a period after oyster production and then an incomplete sentence after. Some formatting stuff. I can email it to you for the sake of moving on.
I see it.
Few of those type of comments.
I did delete that period, and it is now a comma. Thank you for that catch.
Yeah, and then you also wouldn't have a period before and after the parentheses. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so it looks like we're moving through that and moving next to 3.5.3, rural land use designations. Is there anything folks want to talk about in this section? Okay. Then the next section is 3.6, coastal dependent development. There was on page 57, as I think the next place I heard a public comment that I'm interested in talking about. I don't know if anybody has something sooner than that that they want to bring up.
Sorry, where did you say?
57.
57.
And I'll have to look in the language. It was a public comment we heard from Ms. Calt about removing other heavy lift operations, but I'm not sure where in here that language sits, so we'll have to hunt for it a little bit.
In response to a previous public comment, which is attached in this document, there was a typo that was caught. So I just wanted to point that out, that that typo has been changed. And then looking for which policy. Okay, so after one, or at 1F, it is the final sentence highlighted, the port overlay zone.
We're fine with taking that out. I think the reason we added it in is not to allow a non-permitted use, but if the heavy lift terminal were to ever be used for shipping purposes, to move product in and out of Humboldt County, that it would be allowed to be used for that. But I mean, that was our simple-minded way of thinking about that. If you would like to have it removed, we're fine with that.
I guess to me, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow along reading, and then also I need to pay attention to you. So yes, please, Commissioner Curiosity, and then Commissioner Fulton.
For me, the issue is because any use is going to have to go through a permitting process and a public review process and EIR process. So the issue for me is whether or not we're signaling the allowance of particular industries that we don't want to see.
Just contradicts what you just said about the housing. It's just the same subject, but a different.
Talk into the mic.
I said, you just said the opposite when we were talking about residential. Now we want to not have it in there because we don't want to suggest that we want it, but we just said we want to put the heavy I don't understand. I mean, how are we saying that we're against having offshore wind and we want to make it difficult by not putting it in there?
It's not, it's not, offshore wind development is in there, and that's not the question. The question is, do we want to add this phrase right after, the heavy lift marine terminals are needed to provide support for offshore wind development. I don't hear anybody wanting to take that out. But what was added in the last revision was that phrase right after it, or for other permitted heavy lift port operations.
Like if they're making ships? They used to make ships here, so if they decided to make ships here again, they wouldn't be able to do it because we took that out?
I mean, there are certain uses of a heavy lift port that I would not want to signal my personal receptiveness to. That's obviously just me. But I mean, I acknowledge your point. I think you're right to draw the connection. Commissioner Curriasi was saying, I think we should signal that in certain places, the high density development may be appropriate within this area. And arguably the opposite here. We want to signal that we don't want this to be used for a major cargo shipping facility, offshore oil development, or a lot of things that are not.
Tourist boats,
Cruise, that's a different, I don't think that involves a heavy lift. I think that's a separate issue, though, that's not impacted by this phrase. I'm not an expert. I'm really trying to get caught up on this, but as I understand it, that phrase and that particular, heavy lift marine terminal isn't about cruise ships or tourists. It's about certain types of heavily industrial uses that might need to lift heavy things on and off a ship. And this is sort of, the 82 plan had all the stuff about offshore oil drilling that got taken out. So, I was glad to see it taken out. And the wind stuff got put in. So it's just a question of, but do we want, and I'm not saying I'm firmly against it, I'm just saying, do we want to signal, or maybe there's other permitted heavy lift port operations, what would they be, I guess is the question.
Yeah, if I could.
Okay.
I would really call your attention to the word permitted.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's just happened in this plan is that onshore support facilities for offshore oil has been removed as a principally permitted use. So it would have to be something that would be, and we could change the language to principally permitted to mean that there's this narrow subset of uses. I think one of the things that I would ask the commission to think about is that if all that investment were put into that port, if for whatever reason wind didn't occur, would we want that taken out? Or would we want to see a beneficial use of it? If the answer is no, we want it out, then certainly make it as restrictive as possible and take that language out.
I hear Commissioner Farland, but I did have Commissioner Fulton first, and then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
No, it's actually two things. I want to address the takeout of the wordage. I'm having a hard time dealing with why we are chaining ourselves down to specific things we can and cannot do. Everything that you may personally be opposed to, or whatever the case may be, still has to go through a planning process, and they come through here. But I think by limiting what we can and can't do with our port currently, we're dying for jobs here anyway, so we're limiting ourselves in situations like yes, it's a very sensitive bay. I'm with you on that, but I'm not comfortable restraining ourselves from anything done in the future. I think there's opportunities there, and if we constrict ourselves, even you'd mentioned they took out whether it's helping the offshore oil. They can't even come to shore to get support. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, but it was taken out. There's opportunities there for us to develop and to grow as a community, and we're going to limit ourselves based off of just putting ourselves in a box. We got to keep ourselves open to opportunities. The other thing that I wanted to address is one when I first originally, we decided to move to this portion of the wetlands conversion to agriculture, that type of stuff. I'm not sure if maybe I missed that. Was that in the rural or urban rural development, or is that in the ag portion? I've looked through the agricultural thing and I couldn't find it yet.
It
Do you
is.
recall?
It is discussed more thoroughly in Chapter 5, which would be coastal resources. It's not explicitly called out in the agriculture land use designation, nor rural subdivision requirements. So no, there's no explicit discussion of it in this document, or in the section of the document that we're currently on.
Yeah, perfect.
Commissioner McFarland?
I was just gonna say, I think we should go ahead and accept the language about the permitted actions and leave it at that. I don't think we should narrow it down, because then we're kind of taking the public voice away. So as long as it's permitted, the public can weigh in on future decisions for the port or the heavy lift terminal, whatever. I think if we go down the path of deciding what is and isn't appropriate tonight, it's not fair to the public because they didn't comment on those specifics. So I think we either leave it as permitted, and then in the future, when something comes up, if it comes up, the public can weigh in.
Commissioner Levy?
I'll offer my 2 cents, and I know we're referencing the heavy lift marine terminal because that's on everybody's mind right now, but in my view, we could just have the port overlay zone to address heavy industrial uses, whereby in the overlay zone, we do set the criteria for height, noise, whatever criteria we want, but it doesn't have to necessarily be, if a heavy lift terminal comes along, yes, it would have to comply with the port overlay zone, but it doesn't have to specifically just be for heavy lift marine terminals. It could be for any heavy industrial development in the bay. And it feels a little bit like we're just, because we know this is coming, okay, or maybe coming, we're going to put this paragraph in, but this plan is going to go for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So why are we limiting ourselves to one thing? Why don't we just set the criteria in the port overlay zone for the types of impacts related to development that we would accept?
Commissioner Curiosity. Okay.
Could I even maybe do something that may address both concerns? What if we just said, or other principally permitted CDI use?
Yes.
Why principally permitted?
That's the term of art in a coastal zone. Principally permitted is a subset of uses that are permitted by right.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm not understanding what the specifying principally. Are you saying because if it's conditional, it's going to go to a public hearing, and so we'll have? It principally permitted because we wouldn't have another public opportunity to review that particular project. Is that why?
So that would be part of it. We could say permitted. Principally permitted and permitted mean the same thing. Principally permitted, though, is just something that the Coastal Commission is particular about. Okay? So if we just said or other permitted CDI use, it would mean the same thing, accomplish the same thing. It would have to already be listed as a permitted use. There are things right now that are going to get moved out of the permitted use within the zoning ordinance, I think, because the board, I was going to bring this up under reports from planner, but I'll give you a preview. The board on Tuesday voted to write an ordinance prohibiting onshore support facilities for offshore oil, and also onshore support facilities for deep sea mining. Wasn't a unanimous vote, but they did vote for that.
Maybe we're thinking along the same vein as we just don't want to include language that would bypass the public process for other future uses that maybe we're not thinking of right now.
I understand that. I think Commissioner Skavdal raises a really good point, and we may be trying to influence what could actually be permitted by language that was written recognizing that the heavy lift terminal is out there. But fundamentally, a CDI use is something that's dependent upon a deep water channel. A heavy lift terminal is consistent with that right now. And so what we did was that we wrote something that probably said, hey, we don't want there to be any confusion here. The result is that we confused it.
And also, I think that you were wanting to signal that is coming up again, offshore wind.
Right.
And the support for offshore wind. And then you saw the realization, well, we don't want to exclude just to offshore wind. And so so I was leaning towards Commissioner Skavdal's suggestion again, but noting that we're potentially losing that signal for supporting offshore wind, but I feel like it's noted elsewhere. So.
No, I think we're sending a signal that we're supporting industrial development, coastal dependent industrial development. Sorry, it keeps going away from me. I think the signal is we're trying to support coastal dependent industrial development in the appropriate areas of the bay. And if we decide to create an overlay zone, we're going to put some brackets around that development by the conditions that are included that are ultimately included in an overlay zone. And I think where we're struggling is we're trying to envision, back to Commissioner Fulton, we're trying to envision, well, what could all that potential development be and what's okay and what's not okay? That's a little hard to do in a general planning type document, right? That comes through other processes, through the EIR and through the other reviews that'll happen in the future. So I think, and this, as soon as we start mentioning the project, heavy lift marine terminal, to me, that slips into, in a general planning type document, now we're talking about a specific project.
So if I'm hearing the discussion here correctly, what we should really do is kind of sanitize that paragraph to refer to when heavy lift marine terminals consistent with the CDI are proposed, the use of a port development overlay would be an appropriate mechanism to pursue that.
Yeah, because you wanted to open the door to
right
that potential future overlay. Yep. That would be that's my thinking on there.
I understand that, I think what's being said, but I guess looking at that sentence again, first of all, as phrased now, it says, so I have two questions here, as phrased now, as I read it, it seems to mean that the port overlay zone will only be established if and when heavy lift marine terminals are needed, whether for offshore wind or some other potentially permitted. Is there a reason why a port overlay zone could be, Is that the only scenario? I guess I'm just trying to understand if the port overlay zone really doesn't apply if there's not a heavy marine lift facility involved. Or are there other ways in which that overlay may be relevant to shaping and guiding the type of CDI that we do and do not want to see?
I understand your question. It's a little hard for us to envision a point that there could be transportation needs in Humboldt County that are of such a bulk that it would be helpful to have a heavy lift terminal to move stuff on and off a ship, because we don't have that kind of an industrial base here. But maybe someday, even associated with offshore wind, there could be manufacturing facilities that come in to support the offshore wind, and they would need the deep water access, they would need a heavy lift terminal, and they would be bringing bulk items in and manufacturing it. Maybe there would be another kind of industry that did come in that was reliant upon that kind of coastal access to bring stuff in, offload it, transform it, maybe ship it off or use it locally.
Mm-hmm.
Would we not want the ability to have a port overlay zone to address those needs? And part of the question that is coming up, just to kind of maybe cut to the quick, do we only want a port overlay zone if it's the offshore wind heavy lift terminal? I mean, that's what we're circling around, I think.
Right. I think that is kind of what we're circling around. I personally think there's some value in leaving the language that refers to offshore wind developments rather than taking out that whole first part of the sentence before the comma and just saying, and not referring to coastal wind and just sort of referring to generic coastal dependent industrial development, or I'm not totally sure if that's what was being suggested. I mean, I hear the arguments on both sides of this, that the other permitted heavy lift port operations might seem to be giving a signal that we're, open for other sorts of heavy industrial port development that aren't wind related. And I think a lot of people are willing to say that's worth the impacts if what it's doing is actually contributing to a, climate solution or whatever, that sort of, but honestly, I'm not opposed to some version of, I hear what people are saying about, we can't foresee exactly what all the industrial uses of a port overlay zone might be. And I actually don't necessarily oppose leaving some language in there that allows for other permitted operations, but still refers to offshore wind development, because I just feel like it was an important thing to get that language into this plan. And I would hate to take that out altogether, but I'm also open to allowing for other uses.
I saw Commissioner Curiosity.
Thank you. I guess I am similarly in both camps. I think, but I also feel like offshore wind is addressed here, and it's clear that a part of in other places, and it's part of this change is we want to see offshore wind. So I'm not feeling like necessarily the loss of stating offshore wind in this particular paragraph kind of removes that signal.
That's a fair point.
Well.
And then
So
Commissioner O'Neill.
You're talking about the ability to deliver or ship out of this area goods. It doesn't necessarily have to have a real negative connotation. You have a bay here, it's a large bay, and in the past it was used to bring goods in and out. It's still like logs go in and out of the bay. So you have to have heavy lift operations to get them in and out. So I think that's less invasive than a lot of other things that we've talked about doing. So they're already doing one for the wind. So it's not like we're preventing that from happening, because I think that's already happening, according to what I just looked online. So maybe it's just the words you use, but I don't think you should stop the use of the bay for bringing goods into the bay or departing. If you have a business and that's more economical to ship it out than it is to ship it by gas down the road, then we shouldn't stop that. Maybe there's just a different word that you use. Or words.
This is why we need another workshop. I just need more time to digest some of this. This is a good dialogue for me to have. I see both sides of it too. I just need more time to chew on this one a little bit. But definitely support heavy lift, definitely support offshore wind. Just don't want this to be limiting in some way to other future potential uses along the waterfront.
Yeah, if I could, I think that's what we tried to do, is just to say that for whatever reason, offshore wind didn't work or needs to be supplemented or something else, this can be used in other applications, but it's got to be for a permitted use.
Yep.
And so I think that, if there's a consensus to make sure that offshore wind is referenced, that kind of scratches that itch. And if it's okay to refer to other permitted uses, then we're at least close.
Yeah, I'm okay with offshore wind being. It's one of the drivers, I thought, for updating the document. Wasn't specifically stated in there, though.
It is an absolute change circumstance since the last Humboldt Area Plan was adopted or updated. So it's not something we could ignore, and so it does appear a lot.
Yep.
Commissioner McFarland?
This might be like overly simplistic, but could you leave the wind and then say other permitted heavy lift operation, other permitted that have gone through the public process? Like, can you make that explicit?
Well, the struggle is, frankly, and this is what you're afraid of, I think, if the heavy lift terminal is there and another use wants to come in that is a permitted use and they're doing no new development, there is no discretionary process. But that doesn't change anything because they're already permitted uses. If somebody's coming in to put in a new heavy lift terminal, that's a different story. There is definitely a public process there. And we get into a bit of a conundrum sometimes because we get so focused on public process and we're trying to balance being inviting to business, to industry. And if we make everything a prolonged public process, not that our processes are prolonged, but in some people's perception they are, that you're not inviting. So, one of the things we've talked about is pre-approving some things and actually approving and building some things to try to get people to come in and do business in Humboldt County. So it really is recognizing what is it that we want to signal with this policy document.
And that's the point I'm getting at. Do we not have a lot of industrial use because we don't have a heavy lift terminal, or do we not have a heavy lift terminal because we don't have industrial use? We don't know, right? So, so that's why I don't want to just box it in to just be wind related.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it would probably make sense to change the heavy lift terminal, other heavy lift terminal, to other permitted CDI uses. I think that gets at some of the concerns I've heard articulated, is there's some uses we just don't want. If we define it as permitted CDI uses, frankly, the county has some control over that, because you get to go through a process and decide what those uses are.
And then we're still providing some surety to anybody who's looking to invest and develop a project around here, that they know what is allowed and what's not allowed. Yeah. Commissioner Levy.
Sorry. And as you've already discussed, as Rhiannon noted at the beginning, this is not the Port Overlay Zone. This is just a really high-level indication that certain uses and activities that we want to consider permitting, you know, may occur here and require us to do a Port Overlay Zone, at which time we can get more specific, presumably, about what the parameters for an acceptable versus unacceptable use might be. So I guess I'm kind of persuaded that, you know, leave in the reference to wind, but maybe broaden that first sentence, because as I understand it, a Port Overlay Zone could be a good thing to do, you know, for a number of different types of uses, including those that don't specifically involve heavy lift. You know, that's kind of what I was thinking too. And so I don't know quite where this leaves us, how that sentence should be rewritten, but I've appreciated, like Ivor said, I've appreciated the dialogue. I need to sort of go back and read some of this a little bit more carefully and how it relates to other sections.
How would the commission feel about, I think, tabling this one, and we can revisit it next time after we've had some pondering, and maybe staff has some time to think about language, and we can move forward tonight and then come back to this one?
I'd support that.
Okay, looks like I have enough of a consensus.
I think that's fine. I think we're overthinking what heavy lift is, but that's just my opinion again. I mean, if you're going to encourage all these businesses to be in the bay and they need to get their goods out of the area, the only other way is to bring a bunch of trucks on the road, and, you know, maybe taking it by a crane is the way to do it. I mean, we had a crane in Klamath to lift the fish out of the boats. You know, we wouldn't want to say, oh, you couldn't do that because that's heavy lift. It was just a crane on a concrete slab. So what is heavy lift? I don't even know if we all agree on what that is.
Yeah, it's, unfortunately, it's fundamentally something that doesn't really fit into the zoning ordinance, but it is a use that is permitted. Yeah, well, and it's a really, really big statement, because, you know, there's economics, which is important. There's business growth, which could be considered important. There's reclaiming sites that are full of hazardous materials, that any development there would result in those being cleaned up. With respect to offshore wind, certainly there's environmental climate consequences related to it. So there's all kinds of benefits. And one of the things that it's important to be careful about is not doing something that has unintended consequences. You know, you can tie things up really tight.
So I think maybe this is a good place to move on, or did you have another?
Just a super quick question. Did the Coast Guard by chance weigh in on the utility of a heavy lift terminal to them in the future? No. Okay.
So I think The next place I have is on page 58. Is there something else further down page 57 or at the top of 58? Commissioner Curiosity.
Can I actually bring us back to 3.3.1 that I missed an item there?
What page are you looking at?
This is page 30. Way back. I apologize. Yep. I didn't structure my comments by chapter, and that was a failing. There is, it's that same paragraph where oil was struck, and it now starts with natural gas pipelines. It's the 4th paragraph. It says allowed in all land use designations in accordance with 3.14b. And I'm not clear on what 3.14b is referencing, but my thought here was not wanting to see that in residential zones. At least when I read this, my thought went to the San Bruno incident.
The reference to sections 3.14B, 5, and 6 is from the old section 3.14. And that's why it's highlighted. It's something that we do need to correlate. I can pull up on my laptop what section that was referring to and confirm if there's a mention of residential if you'd like.
Or at least, yeah, exactly, yeah, taking that request.
Actually, we'll take a look at that, and if it already restricts residential, we will just tell you that. If it doesn't, we'll bring it back as a further discussion item.
Commissioner McFarland?
Hopefully this is a super simple question that I'm not understanding. In the agriculture exclusive section, so page 51, I'm just wondering why hog production is called out specifically when later you talk about like similar CAFOs and livestock operations. Like, why are hogs
I don't
not?
think we changed anything there.
Okay, I'm just like why are hogs not considered part of livestock operation? Because then like what are chickens? I guess I'm just wondering.
I could comment to the fact that was from the 1982 draft and it just didn't get deleted, but I mean, that is probably something, there probably was a distinguishing factor back then. That's something we could look into.
If hogs and chickens and cows are all considered livestock, then unless there's something special about it, calling it out, maybe we just get rid of hog production. I don't know.
Well, I mean, part of the struggle is that in many places, hog production is far more intensive and environmental damaging than just grazing land.
But this talks about a similar confined livestock. So isn't that a CAFO? And a CAFO would be a confined feed lot, which is, like what we see along the 5. So that would be, like CAFOs are regulated as hog productions as well. So I think that's the part that's tripping me. Like if we say like grazing land, that's obviously different than a CAFO. So I'm happy to split it out that way.
Under principal use, I can't read that. Does that have CAFO up there?
Barns, storage sheds, agricultural structures. I don't see CAFO. Food.
Yeah, I think that's the distinction.
McKinley needs to be turkeys.
No, I know. I think that's a differentiation between a principal use and a conditional use.
But hog production and CAFO are both in condition.
Right. Because typically hog production is not grazing.
Yeah, hog production would be a feedlot, which is a CAFO, which is not grazing. So this section, like, it doesn't call out grazing, which is.
I know, that's why it's a conditional use.
Yeah, I'm just asking why hog production isn't part of that.
We didn't change that. I mean.
Yeah.
We can take that out.
It's
That's
just,
not
it
a
was
big
just
deal.
something I found.
Because of what's at the end of that paragraph, which ends with feedlots and similar confined livestock operations, you're saying that covers hog production?
Yeah.
Right.
CAFOs cover hogs, chickens, all of it.
Yeah,
Just thought-
yeah.
I just wanted to know if we treated hog production special.
Well,
But it sounds like.
it's all about signaling what you want, what you don't want.
I was just
we want
confused by
hogs.
it.
But do we actually need to say something under the first principal use that uses the word grazing? I mean, production of food fiber plants, I'm just looking at, we have barns, storage sheds, and those are things that are associated with livestock. So I guess the word grazing not being there doesn't matter, because since we're talking about grazing versus confined livestock operations, and we would all agree that grazing is less impactful, more appropriate for all of these zoned lands, but we don't mention grazing, so I don't know.
It probably needs some work. We didn't plan on changing these, but we will go through and give them new definitions.
I mean, yeah, right, exactly. I think it's. I'm speaking. I'm sort of thinking out loud here. This is just sort of short references to these zones that already exist and are well defined elsewhere. So.
Well, and actually, these are land use designations that are intended to be far more general, not specific. They don't actually. They're not the law of what's allowed and not allowed. That's in the zoning ordinance.
Yes.
These are just kind of a description of what this area should be used for.
Totally right. I think this is a little bit maybe too in the weeds for this section. So, but yeah.
I was just calling out because I was confused. If staff and you don't want to change it, it's fine. I'm not saying we have to. I'm just,
we don't care. This is
for
the
my own
community's
learning,
document.
just
Yep.
to see if in this county we regulated hogs separately from CAFOs. So learn, but absolutely do not have to change it.
So one of the things that when you look at this that's a little bit of a struggle is in other areas that is far more agricultural than the Humboldt area plan. It probably is more of an issue. Some of the stuff that's in here related to the Humboldt area plan, I just shake my head because it's so out of date. It's never going to happen. I mean, I'm not being critical with this, but a natural gas pipeline is not, in all likelihood, going to be put through the Humboldt area plan. So that's almost an archaic reference, but it probably still is good to have performance standards in case somebody's tempted to do something that we wouldn't want to have happen.
So we last left off on page 58. Is there anything before 58 that anybody else had that came up? Okay.
You kids.
Moving on to industrial, so this is different than coastal dependent industrial.
So before we get away from coastal dependent industrial and before we get away from the port overlay zone, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the implications of some of the public comment tonight. And some of what's been asked for are to establish, noise standards, which is normally appropriate for like a general plan level. They're not specific, but they are kind of general and talk about what could be or not be permitted. And I think what the folks in Samoa are asking for is, can we incorporate some kind of noise limit that would establish a compatibility level? And if you want to look at an aerial of that area, we can, so you can see how close those industrial uses, that heavy lift terminal is going to be to Samoa. I kind of get the point.
Commissioner Skeptal?
Yeah, but I guess I thought would be taken up in the overlay zone.
So I think what they're asking for is to establish a threshold in the overlay zone that they would have to mitigate to achieve.
Yeah, I heard them ask that too, but I didn't think we needed to take that up yet because we don't have an overlay zone.
Well, there are some criteria in here, like relative to ESHA, that could be a part of the overlay zone. And if you don't want to touch this, I mean, I know it's a red hot poker, but we don't have to.
Commissioner.
Noise addressed in the environmental document?
The noise will absolutely be addressed in the environmental document.
Like hours of operation and all of that?
Yep, all of that. Here's, if I lived there, here would be my fear. I'm probably going to get fired for saying this.
You're a lawyer.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure. Distract me and I'll forget.
Good. If we were to address this, if we were to table it and ask staff to come up with some recommendations based on the public comment and bring them to our continuation for consideration, would that be problematic because that's new information?
It's new information. We could
Okay.
do it for the public hearing.
Maybe some time to think about it?
Well, I guess the reason I asked the question is that I don't want to bring something back. I don't want us to go to the effort of doing that much work if that's not something you'd be interested in trying to tackle.
I would be. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but I just broad parameters to give the folks that have spoken some security and backing. But
Commissioner Levy?
Thanks. I mean, I think I generally agree with what Commissioner McFarland just said, and also Director Ford mentioned that perhaps we could bring up the aerial just to see a little bit more precisely what proximity we're talking about. I thought that was helpful.
The challenge I would have, and still have, is here we go again. We're talking about a project that might or might not happen. We haven't seen the noise analysis for the project. We haven't seen any of the studies. We haven't seen the CEQA document. And this is a general planning document. So I absolutely understand and respect the concerns of the people that are going to live in that neighborhood about the impacts that might be associated with the future project. But I don't know a lot about the future project. So sitting here today and trying to figure out that we could set some noise criteria that jeopardizes a future project without even knowing anything about it, or
That would be the reason not to address it. I mean, frankly, I
just
brought
don't
it
have
up.
enough information
Yep.
to. I mean, there's going to be. Are we going to set height limits? Because we could set a height limit on how high development can be out on the bay. That'll end the wind terminal project pretty quickly. I'm not prepared to do that in this document right now. That's.
Should be done on a project-by-project basis based on the environmental, the noise, the smell. I mean, we have people come in here that didn't want cannabis across the street because it smells, when we said, too bad, we're approving it anyway. So it has to be on almost a case-by-case basis.
Commissioner Curriasi?
Yeah, I think I'm torn between. I agree with Commissioner Scavdall of that this is a general plan. However, we are also saying in this plan that we identify this area as a Samoa town, and we're also allowing an overlay. We're also allowing CDI activity and an overlay immediately adjacent to it. That's the tension that I have.
Commissioner McFarland.
Because in other aspects of our general plan, we do regulate some things like hours of operation, like, for the lighting and things like that. So I totally get what you're saying, so I don't want to go down the weeds of setting the height limit or setting the exact decibel, but maybe there are some broad parameters such as hours of operation or some that we can offer to the community.
I would argue that I get the same nervousness I think that Scavdall does, because we could immediately just kill
The other reality is the community is next to industrial zoned land that's been there for a long time, used to be a mill and a pulp mill. And what's happened over time is the community has changed because there haven't been heavy industrial uses next door for a period of time. And that's the challenge that we're going to face is now, if the industrial use comes back, hasn't been there for 20 years, the community's kind of gotten accustomed to the fact that it's not there.
So I have Director Ford, and then I have Commissioner Fulton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, yeah, it would be highly inappropriate to try to regulate things down to the hours of operation in a general planning document like this. I would think it would be more about determining what compatibility would be. If it's, 80 decibels at the property line, I'm pulling it out of the air. Most people would be really upset with me for saying that. But, it's just something along those lines. And I see both sides. There are two sides to this argument. One is that we don't even know what activities are going to be going on there, what the decibel levels are. Maybe it's not going to be as bad. On the other hand, I think we've got residents asking for some protection. They feel like they've been violated as it is. And I'm overstepping the rule of staff at this point, so I'll stop.
Commissioner Fulton.
Yes, I would just reiterate what Director Ford said, but just speaking on personal experience for a guy that works for a company that has, if you want to call it a marine terminal out there, there's hours of operation. They're limited by tide flow in and out, as are anything else that would be coming in and out of the bay. And if we start putting them in a box, you could have ships costing hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting because now they have to wait for a certain time before they can go out. And the tide may not be conducive to our watches. It's just, there we go, we're putting ourselves in a box again where we don't know what's coming.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I appreciate that discussion, and so I'm in agreement now. It seems that would be a bit of an overreach.
I think I'm still in support of, I don't know, I'm not looking to set thresholds, but I think I'm looking to acknowledge that noise is a concern for the town of Samoa. And while there has historically been operations on the peninsula near them that are noisy and industrial, there haven't been for a long time. And when we're talking about new projects coming forward, we now have this community that has developed and invested, and the noise concerns, I think, should be attended to with that they already exist. And when we have new projects, just because there was an industrial operation there previously, we do now need to acknowledge that there's a neighborhood there. And I don't quite know how to thread that needle in the general plan. I would like to set up I would like language that sets up acknowledging noise as a concern and to be explored more when a permit comes forward.
If that's satisfactory to the commission, that's fairly easy for us to do.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. And then I'd have to see the mapping, but if it was an ideal scenario and we were actually doing the land planning and zoning, we would step down from heavy industrial to lighter industrial to commercial to residential, right, to try to create that buffer space. I don't know if this is just a hard line. It's heavy industrial and residential. They just butt up right against each other, okay?
Yeah, this is really a legacy of a town that was created to support industrial use.
Correct.
That has now been codified there's no longer a town that supports industrial use as its own community.
Well, if I could kind of add to that a little bit, it was a company town.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the people who lived there worked there.
Mhm. But that was sold, and it is now a community. Houses have been sold to residents, and activity has not happened.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one, because you're correct. I mean, this is the whole reason we have planning, is for incompatible uses next to each other.
Yeah.
I went to a lot of these meetings for the wind in my old job. But what I was informed was that our coastline is one of the few coastal areas in California that's not prohibited from having certain activities because of the military restricts access. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. So we have an opportunity here, and I don't think we should sit here and stop future uses. Each one should be judged through its own environmental document and its own mitigation that it has to do. So if you're bringing in a new industry, we have an opportunity, and that's why the wind's coming here, because it's not because it's the greatest place on the coastline. There's only like 2 or 3 places they can even do wind on the California coast because of the military not wanting it to be done in other areas. So each thing that's going to happen is going to have its own environmental document, its own mitigation, its own hearings, all of that. If it's scaled up to that heavy industrial, it's not like a little small business. It's, we're talking. So it would be addressed on that level, and not us sitting here addressing it in this document. And correct me if I'm wrong.
You're fundamentally correct. So I just was trying to respond to the comments that we heard from the public, and their comments, frankly, that when we had the meeting with them early in July, I heard a lot. It's still ringing in my ears. So I didn't want to go by this discussion without making sure that it was discussed here.
Is there a lot of noise now that they're concerned about, or is this future noise that they're worried about?
Well, they know that the heavy lift marine terminal will be about from me to you.
And I just want to be really clear. There's been a couple of comments around not supporting industrial uses, and I just want to make my stance clear. Is like I'm not against industrial uses. I think we're just in a particular special use case on the peninsula where we have a strong residential community seated next to industrial infrastructure, and I just want to I want to make sure that the industrial infrastructure that goes in, to the extent possible, can be good neighbors. And so I'm not trying to kill any projects. I'm just trying to, I think, be attentive to the land uses that are out there more than just the industrial uses.
So how do you propose to address it in here?
Like I said, I'm not entirely sure of the language right now. I think that we're going to need to sit on it a little bit, and it sounds like John has a good idea of how he might address.
Yeah, I think we're going to pull some stuff out of the general plan. Yeah. Very general stuff.
Yeah.
But it talks about, what does compatibility look like? What does conditional compatibility look like? And then that gives the Harbor District or whoever's doing the heavy lift terminal the ability to address that in the IR and make a determination of significance.
That sounds reasonable.
So we're in, we're at 9:20. What time are we looking at to try and wrap up tonight?
We're probably at about there.
Okay. So then for next time, I think we are coming back to 3.6. Is that where?
Yeah, we never started on page 58.
No, we never got to page 58, and that's fine. We'll come back there. I was looking at number 4 in case the commissioners want to think about that one. It's where coastal dependent uses conflict among themselves, priority shall be given to industrial over recreational and commercial uses. And I wanted to have staff explain that thought process a little bit more and then talk about it. But that's a whole other can of worms that we should probably not open tonight. So,
I-
so if the commission is comfortable kind of closing our book on this piece and moving to the next agenda item?
Yeah, just maybe as long as we can each, to the extent that we have like editorial comments or things like that, we don't have to wait till, can we just submit those to staff in advance of the next meeting, so you have those?
If you've got those, that would be extremely helpful for us, and then we can
Typos and
walk through
editorial
the
things.
things that you've got and say, we got that, we fixed
So
that.
encourage everybody that to the extent you have those, we could send those in. And
That's a great idea. Yeah, and this will become public in the sense that when you go through at the continuation, you'll say, these were the points that commissioners raised privately.
Right.
Okay, suggested edits or explain this or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that, thank you.
Sure.
And I
think
guess
it's a
to
good idea.
clarify, at least historically, when I've done that, you've also just simply included those comments in the record. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
although in this case, well, it was a continuation, so I don't know how that complicates. We're not, I think, inviting, can we come back to the question of public comments? Because, I mean, this is a weird case where we've had a, 2-hour discussion or more of this, and then we're going to take some time to think about our own input and send it to you and come back to you, but where does the public fit into that?
So out of a huge provision of caution, I think maybe, if we got comments from you and we addressed those, and the commission got through to the end of it and kind of gave a consensus direction, or was ready to, before doing that, accept public comment.
clarify, accept public comment on commissioners submitted.
On just everything the commission had done by that point.
At the end of the meeting?
Yeah. Well, hopefully with having all your comments ahead of time, we'll get through the meeting or the document really fast.
So I just want to understand, you're saying you would invite us to put our thoughts, comments, questions in writing by some date whereby you could incorporate those into a revised draft and make that public to the
We're not going to have time to do that.
No, I mean, I don't see how you do, so I'm just trying to understand how this will work.
We should just come back, pick up where we left off.
Okay.
Keep working through.
Okay.
I was only suggesting, like, not questions or just minor editorial things. Here's a typo, capital letter, missing sentence.
Yeah.
Fragmented sentences, those
Fair.
kind of things. Just the cleanup part.
Okay.
It's not hopefully a lot, but I have some, and I'm sure some of the other commissioners have some.
It's a large, yeah, there's inevitably some in this big of a document.
Laura, I would think.
I couldn't hear you. Yeah, Rianne.
Is your email in here?
We will email you her email.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess that I appreciate that clarification, because I would not have submitted just minor grammatical comments. So that's good to know. Thank you. I did also want to bring up is it a possibility to have a second continuation to a third workshop? We had talked about timeline in the past, but I just want to acknowledge the density and the length of discussions here.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take as long as it's going to take. If we don't have this done pretty close after the first year, we lose we're operating under a grant right now, and we're running up against a time frame.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can do it. I just don't know what else staff wants to put in front of us on top of all that.
We could consider a special meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
If we need one.
If we need to, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move us to the next item. It sounds like we've discussed this one enough. for tonight? Okay, so item H, report from planner.
So the Board of Supervisors approved the mixed residential density. It was a bit of a discussion because there was at least a portion of the board that wanted to see public disclosure for those kinds of projects. But that's a bit inconsistent with what we're trying to achieve in terms of allowing higher density housing without having to go through a discretionary process. So the board wasn't unanimous on that. They also approved the rezone for the parcel down at the end of Walnut and Ridgewood. Quite a bit of discussion about whether or not that's an appropriate place. It wasn't a unanimous vote there either. There was some concern that really residential shouldn't be allowed down there. But I think most of the board kind of fell in line with the thought that this is just implementing the general plan. And it's really not good to change the goal line after you've already been playing for a while. And so that passed. Then, as I mentioned before, the board also directed staff to prepare prohibitions for onshore support facilities for offshore oil and deep sea mining. Directed a prohibition for detention, primarily private detention facilities, but to explore whether or not any kind of regulations could be adopted for federal facilities. And then directed that a moratorium on data centers be prepared with direction to bring back regulations for data centers. Because data centers, the primary problems are the power usage and the water usage. And if they're not like sucking somebody's aquifer dry or raising electrical prices because of they're using so much power, maybe they're not entirely bad use. So those are things staff will be working on over the coming months. Frankly, staff right now is focused on updating the housing element and getting this done. Still working on housing element implementation in the current housing element. And then the Planning Commission is going to be seeing on August 20th a workshop on the low impact camping area ordinance. Camping. We had a workshop on that last night, and that actually was a pretty productive workshop with a lot of good comments. So we're going to be really working on making those changes.
For the data center policies, will those come before us before they go to the board, or will they go directly to the board?
Come to you first.
Do you think those will come to us before the end of the year?
Doubtful. So I tried to caveat that we've got planners that already have pretty full plates.
And the holidays are going to be on us before we know it.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying to get this really kind of ready for the board before the end of the year. Maybe we still can. And then the housing element fundamentally needs to be done by the end of the year, so we can get a draft in on time. And we've got a few housing ordinances to clean up and get done. And then we've got a backlog of stuff in terms of general plan implementation that we're going to be working on, starting work on. Now that McKinleyville Town Center is done, we're moving out to Glendale to start work on that community plan. And so there's a lot of work to do.
Have you received an appeal for the decision that we made at our last meeting regarding the redwood tree?
No.
Anything else before I move us on?
Nope.
Any Planning Commission discussion items?
Just looking at the calendar, if we do need a special meeting, there's an extra Thursday in October. That might be too far out for you, but I'm anticipating we're going to need one at the rate of progress we're making here. I don't know if that'd be too late, but
No, I'm sure we can work that out.
otherwise, I'm suggesting maybe you just poll commissioners for over the next week or so.
Well, you could
What
do
day?
this meeting sooner than October and then push something else to October, maybe.
Yeah, I think, we can keep pushing with this, the August 6th meeting. The August 20th meeting is the low-impact camping ordinance.
Okay.
There may be time at the end of that meeting. I'm hesitant to put this in front of everything in the event that all those things that are scheduled there that people are ready for don't
Right.
happen. But we're already on for September 3rd, so, or we're already planning that would be that meeting, and then September 17th would be the next September meeting, so.
I mean, I just will say, because you said at the beginning that September 3rd was when you were hoping to bring this to a public hearing, correct?
Correct.
I feel like, I think some of us felt like we hadn't had time to digest all this. It's a lot of pages, but I feel like a second meeting for the workshop on August, the next meeting in August should be sufficient for the workshopping, and then that'll give you a month to bring it back to a public hearing where everybody can have a chance to comment. To me, it feels like we should be able to aim to do that.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other planning discussion items? Commissioner McFarland?
I was just wondering with the Chalk Mountain mining comments that we keep getting, is there any updates on the legal status, or should we doing anything?
Yeah, we have no new comments on that.
Okay.
Okay, I think that looks like there are no other planning commission discussion items, so we'll just go ahead and move to the adjournment. We have our next meeting scheduled for August 6th at 6 p.m. in these chambers.